I've compiled all of my favorite tools you can find on Amazon into one compilation video. And to make it easier for you, I'm going to link to these tools in the description and the pinned comment by timestamp. Speaking of easier, one of the tools that makes my life easier is called a thin rip jig. If you've ever had to make several thin strips on your table saw, this thing is going to be your next best friend. If you see on the router table or the workbench where I've ripped those 1/2 or 3/4 inch wide walnut strips to cover the edge of that plywood to make it look a little better, or various other reasons you need to rip thin strips, this thing will make everything much easier. Let me show you. So it runs in a miter slot, fits most table saw miter slots. Put it behind the blade, never put it at or on the other side of the blade because that could cause kickback. So the way this works is it has a knob on top. You loosen that off and you set the fence where you want it for the first cut. Move this over until it touches your work or the wood you're cutting, and then tighten this knob down. Once you snug this knob down, it's going to snug up in the T-track or in your miter slot as well. That way it doesn't move. And then there's a roller right here on the end that rolls, helps guide the wood through the cut. And I'm going to make several cuts to show you how it works. But once you make the first cut, then you can move your fence over with the stock between the fence and the jig. And then when it bumps, lock your fence down to make your next cut. It's going to be the same every single time. So as you can see, I was able to make 7 strips that are 1/4 inch wide, exactly the same, just by moving the fence. If you've ever tried to make that 1/4 inch rip by setting the fence at a 1/4 inch and then ripping with the 1/4 inch between the blade and the fence, you know at the end of that cut it gets kind of hairy because there's only a 1/4 inch space, so you can't get a push stick in there to finish the cut. And it makes it it's just too dangerous. This makes it a lot safer, and it's a really cool little jig that you can use in multiple places. This is one of those tools you'll be glad you got it when you need it, and they're so inexpensive, it's well worth having it in the shop. It's extremely well made, all aluminum except for this top handle, which is plastic, but other than that, everything is metal, so it's gonna last you a very long time. I like that it has a scale on there, and I like how easy it fits or works on the table saw. I said it'll work on a router table or bandsaw. That's if you have a proper miter slot in there and not T-track. Just keep that in mind. Number 1 on the list is the DFM Small Square. This thing is very small, but it packs a ton of features into a tiny little package. Let me show you. And if you're not a fan of purple, like I am, then you can actually get this in blue, black, gray, or even tie-dye colors. So multiple colors to choose from. I'll put a link in the description below to all the tools you see in the video today. One of the main uses for such a small square is using it to square up the blade on your table saw. And the reason a small square works in this situation is it's under the teeth of the blade. So you raise your blade up and then you can put this on there and then move it to square, and the teeth don't affect it. On a lot of times on, say, a speed square or any other type of right angle square that is taller than, say, 2 or 3 inches, the teeth start affecting it because you have to make sure that the blade of the square isn't touching one of the teeth on your saw blade, because if it does, it'll throw it off. If you squared your table saw blade up with a longer square before, you know what I'm talking about. Also, if you have a small bench top bandsaw like I have, it's really great for that because there's not many squares that can fit in this tiny little space to check the square of the blade to the table. This is perfect for that. You can also use this at the drill press to check the square of your drill bits to the table all the way around. Another really cool feature of this little square is it comes with these little metal pins that drop in these holes. And it's going to help you find the center of any board up to this wide. Drop those pins in, then twist it, and then wherever it lands right there is going to be centered. There's a hole in the middle that's 4 pencils. It has a small hole down in the bottom for pencil lead to go through. You just twist that and then you just mark the board. That's going to be your center mark. It also works on thinner stock as well. That's going to be center every time. Of course, a square is a square for a reason, and you can use it to check the square of your cuts if you're using smaller pieces like this or like this. You can also use it to check the face to the edge of a square of thin stock like this. And of course, you can use it on chisels to check, uh-oh, that one's out of square. You can check the blade of your chisel to see if they're square, which mine are not. You'll find a ton of uses for this tiny little square in your shop. It's durable, it's made out of solid aluminum, so even if you chunk it like I just did, it's not gonna hurt it. And you can stick it in your pocket and keep it with you at all times just in case you're at Walmart and need to know if the shelf is square. A DFM setup block. Now, I bought all of these tools. DFM doesn't even know my name. I just saw these on Amazon and thought they were fantastic. So I picked both the square and this up. Check this out. So we got our blade square earlier, remember, with the little setup square. Now we can use the setup block to actually get the height set correctly. What I love about this little block is it's really simple to use. It stands on its own and has clearly marked measurements. This is 1/8, 3/8, 5/8. The other side's quarter, half, 3/4, all the way up to 2 inches. You can use this to set the height of your blade. And the blade itself is precisely 1/4 inch thick, so you could also use it that way to set up 1/4 inch deep. Quarter. And of course you can also use it here at the router table to set the depth of your bits as needed, all the way from, again, 1/8 to 2 inches. You can also use it on a fixed base router to set the depth, but it does take a little extra oomph because it'll fall off the edge and not hold square. It's not really the best for this, but it will work in a pinch. DFM tools are made in the USA if you like to support USA owned and operating companies, so go check them out. I'll put a link to this in the description. Spring clamps. This is a 6-inch spring clamp from Tay Tools. You can get a 10-pack of these for less than $15 at the time of this recording, so you can get a ton of these for a low price. They actually come in several different sizes, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 9, I believe. These are the 6-inch models. What's really great about these is they actually have a really strong spring, get a good clamping pressure, and then also pivoting, non-marring jaws on the tips. And then in the jaw of them, there's little teeth. So if you had to clamp around something round like a dowel, this would work for that as well. Most of us work alone in the shop, and having an extra set of hands is always needed in a lot of situations anyway. So for instance, if I was trying to hang these drawer slides, a lot of times I like to make my mark where they're going to go, and then trying to get those in place without some type of jig or help can be difficult. These little clamps will help you get those in place, and then you can set your drawer slide in place and then attach it to the frame that you're going to be putting the drawers in. So that's going to give you a little support, an extra hand in that situation. Also on small glue ups where you don't want to break out the big clamps or you just don't need them, you can just use these to hold your pieces in place while they dry. These are super handy for that because you can put multiples on there. They have plenty of clamping pressure for small parts like that. If I was gluing those 2 pieces up and needed just to hold those while the glue dried, perfect for that. You can also use them like a face clamp, similar to a pocket hole when you're pocket holing pieces together. Because these 2 pieces pivot, you'll be able to put those pieces together. It'll hold them flush while you drive your pocket holes. And I'm telling you, there's just so many uses for these things. We could just keep going. I keep mine here on the end of the workbench so that they're always handy, within arm's reach. But you can also clamp them on the shelf, as you see here, just anywhere that this thing will clamp to. A 10-pack of these for under $15, like that's a no-brainer in my opinion, just to have these in the shop when you need them. They're very well made. This is a good quality plastic. It doesn't feel cheap at all. And the spring, I don't know how to explain how much pressure is there. I couldn't hold this for an extended length of time just sitting here like this. My hand would get really tired because it's a really strong spring. Even putting your finger in it is uncomfortable. It doesn't like crush you, but it's uncomfortable. This is a really good set of hand clamps or spring clamps that you need to pick up in your shop. Clamping assembly squares. If you have ever tried to put 2 pieces of plywood together making a cabinet, like on the router table, or even this workbench, or building cabinets, miter stations, anything like that, and you need those 2 pieces to stay 90 degrees while you're working on them, and it won't fall over on you constantly like you see here, or you're trying to pocket hole things together and you just need them to hold at 90 degrees, free up your hands because you're by yourself. As we stated before, you just need an extra set of hands. This is what you need. And of course, they come in a variety of sizes. The 8-inch, the biggest ones, are under $15, under $20 at the time of this filming, and that's the most expensive set. You're going to get 4 in the set. Of course, you can pick up the 6-inch, the 4-inch, or the 3-inch as well. Of course, as they get smaller, the price goes down on the sets. So how do they work? Well, they're actually really simple. They're a perfect 90-degree angle. Doesn't matter which size you get. If we were joining these 2 pieces together, then you would need to hold that somehow. If you listen to me and you picked up these, of course, this is the easiest, fastest way. You're going to clamp that in place. It's going to be there. Or you can use F-style clamps like these. But as you can see, that took a little bit longer because I'm having to wrench that down on by myself and all that. But it works. So you can use F clamps, you can use these clamps. Now this is at a perfect 90 degree. I've got pocket holes drilled on the back, and I can attach these two pieces if I need to, when I need to, and if I want to go take a lunch break, this is going to be there, and it's not going to move on me. While not on the list, these little F clamps are also under $30, and they're really handy to have for applications just like this. If you want to pick some of those up, I'll drop a link to these, even though just kind of bonus. These are great if you're just trying to lay your piece out and make sure everything's going to fit right, kind of dry fit, or mark for mortise and tenon, mark for dowels, mark for dominoes, anything like that where you just need everything to kind of stay in place. These little clamping squares are awesome. Also, you can use them on either side and just clamp them in place like that. As inexpensive as these are and solidly made, it says glass reinforced nylon. I'm not sure what that means other than probably the material it's made out of. They're not gonna break. They're really solid. They're perfect 90s. I also like the fact that on the back, there's like a little 45 chamfer there, so you can get it all the way in that corner without anything getting in the way. And then of course it has a little scale here on the side, 45, and all of them are perfect 90 to each other. So if you want to mix and match them, you could do that as well. These are one of those tools, you know, when you see it, you're like, I gotta have me some of those. So go get them. These are bench cookies, and I like these because they have a grippy rubber on them on the top and bottom, and these are perfect for elevating your workpiece while you route, and it keeps it from sliding and moving around the workbench. I use these all the time, nearly daily out here when I'm routing small pieces, just because of how useful they are and inexpensive. They're the KREG setup bars. I use these all the time for setting the height of my bits, or even my blade on my table saw, or the fence on the table saw. These are very, very useful. If I needed to cut a 1/2 inch groove in something, I need to set that straight bit. This notch is a 1/2 inch. This set goes from 1/8 all the way up to 1/2 inch in 1/16 inch increments. So you have several different settings there. These are useful to set that bit depth accurately every single time and very fast. And they come in a nice case so you don't lose them. This is the Rikon 2-inch orbital sander. Now, this I showed in last year's video, and it sold out, and it was sold out for months, probably 6 or 7 or 8 months before it finally started coming back in stock. They finally got them back in stock. I'll link to them in the description. If you make small parts or boxes or trays or anything you need to get into tight areas to sand, this is a great little machine. Now, it comes with a 12-volt battery, so yeah, you're gonna get another battery platform, but literally it's one battery. And the battery life on it will last quite a long time. Pick up these little round discs on Amazon. They're Velcro or hook and loop back, and this is just a great little tool. I use this almost every week in the shop when I'm making these trays and things. It helps me sand out the inside of those trays, get those tool marks out of there. It's just a fantastic little machine. Now, it's not random orbital. In other words, it's just spinning in a circle. So as long as you keep it moving, you're gonna have a nice finish. If you leave it sitting still, it'll take the material off. Like, this is a powerful little sander for $100. Like, you can't find one of these anywhere else for this price. You can't. A lot of other places have very similar styles to this, and they can be $500, $600, $700. But for Rikon to come out with this one for $100, it is a steal. One of my favorite things I've ever added to my shop are these Bora wood organizers, and a lot of you got these this year because they've been on some really good deals. Now, I have 2 of them in the shop, and you can see here they are stocked full. They hold a bunch of weight. Just make sure you install them into a stud properly as the instructions state, but I've got them loaded up with wood, and that's where I keep my hardwoods up out of my way, off the floor, and they're properly stored. I was worried that they were gonna cup or bend because of the 2 posts. That doesn't happen. And I've been using them for probably a year or more. These are really, really good storage racks for lumber. I can't recommend them enough. Next up, the Bosch 1617 router has been a very popular router this year, and I have it in my router table. Plus, I did a full review breakdown of that versus the DeWalt. It's such a great router for the price. I love the plunge base on this router. I love the way it adjusts, how everything worked. Everything about this router is very, very nice. Now, the fixed base I preferred on the DeWalt, but as far as plunge base go, power, everything else you're gonna need in a router, you're getting this for usually under $200 for a fixed and a plunge base router with a 1/2 and a 1/4 inch collet. This is one of those routers that will last you for years and years. You can use that freehand, you could use it with an edge guide, you use it at a router table. It's just such a versatile tool to have for the shop. And at one of the better prices for this power range of a router, it's just a solid pick. Fast cap zero clearance tape is what this is. I've used this for years, probably since 2017, 2018. This was very popular. I showed it in a video on miter saw upgrades this year, and a lot of you took advantage of this and love this. What's great about the zero clearance tape is it's easy on and it comes off easily. It's not going to damage, it's nothing permanent, and it makes you have better cuts. So you're going to get a really clean cut. It's also going to prevent those small parts from falling down into the throat plate and getting jammed, clogged up, stuff like that. And for the price, I think you get 5 in the pack. This is a really good product to upgrade your miter saw. It's a very easy upgrade anybody can do. One of my more popular videos was 5 table saw upgrades you should make, and the gripper was one of those in my opinion. This is my favorite push block that I've ever purchased. I purchased this, not sponsored by anybody here. This is great for getting those small rips, thin rips, and I love the fact that you can adjust that leg down. Everybody who's been woodworking any time at all seen the gripper, and there's a reason why it is so popular. I don't buy the knockoff brand grippers. I showed one of those that I bought from Temu. It's not as good. These are well made. They're going to last you for a very long time, and it just makes using your table saw that much safer and easier. That's why this is my pick for one of the best push blocks you can buy. This is UHMW plastic stuff that inserts in there. You can change these out easily as well. And they do come with 5 in the package, so you'll have several to use, whether you're doing bevel cuts or straight cuts or just something like mine. It just gets damaged over time. Improve your miter saw is the blade. It sounds simple, but if you're still using the stock blade and you're doing woodworking, not rough construction, take the blade that come with it off, because typically those are like 32 teeth and they cut really rough. That's what they're made for, rough construction, fast cuts. You want to get something like an 80 tooth. I use this 82 CMT chrome blade. It's a 12-inch saw, 12-inch blade. This is a fantastic blade, and they stay sharp a very long time. They create a very smooth, very nice, clean cut. You're going to see a major, major improvement if you just upgrade your blades. Again, I like the higher tooth blade for woodworking because 99% of the time we're doing cross cuts. And if you're doing a lot of cross cutting, a higher tooth blade will produce less tear out. In other words, a cleaner cut. There are other options available to you, but I think CMT is one of the better blades I've used, and I've kept CMT blades on this saw for years. The Jessom stock guides. If you cut a lot of sheet goods or even thinner stock, this really helps hold the stock against the fence. Because of the way these things are designed, they have rollers that are kind of slightly tilted towards your fence, and it literally pulls the stock or the plywood or the wood, whatever you're cutting, toward the fence. Keeps it pressed tight against the fence so you don't have any deviation in your cuts. This is an extremely easy upgrade. Jessom makes some amazing tools. I've been extremely pleased with this. I built this jig based on a design my friend had. I have free plans for this jig. If you have a saw stop and you want to make the same kind of jig, they're on the website. It's using 2 mag switches to keep it in place. These lock it down tight. It never budges from there. And then you can adjust these stock guides anywhere you need them to make the cuts that you need. This has been one of the better upgrades I've made to my table saw. And when they're not in use, because they're in mag switch, I can mag switch them to my metal storage cabinets, and it's just up and out of the way. Or you can hang it. There's a hole here designed so that you can hang it on the wall, keep them out of the way and safe from getting damaged. The good thing about the Jessom stock guides is they can be adapted. You can make jigs to fit basically any table saw that you're using. The only downside to the Jessom stock guides is if you don't have a table saw with a fence similar to this, you'll have to come up with your own jig to fit it to your table saw. That's not hard. We're woodworkers, we build stuff. Feather boards and or push sticks. I know it's a boring topic, but listen to me. There have been multiple people injured by the push stick that comes with their table saw. I made a video about that. There's the thumbnail, what it looks like, and I'll put it in the description below. But typically the push stick that comes with your table saw isn't that great. It's just plastic. Those can shatter and cause massive injuries to your arms, face, torso, etc. I highly recommend throwing that thing in the trash and getting a proper one or building your own out of wood. It's really not that difficult to make push sticks depending on what style you like. Obviously the micro jig gripper is one of the best that I recommend because it can basically go over the blade and still keep your hand safe so long as the blade is low enough. That's one of the things you have to watch out for. It is really great when you're cutting thin stock so that you can adjust this little foot. Still gives you quite a bit of balance there. They've recently come out with the Gripper Row 2, which is also a really nice little push stick, and it works in a few different ways, but overall I like the Gripper better. Bow Products makes some push sticks also that have a foam tip, so if it does hit the blade, it just cuts the foam and doesn't damage the plastic. Those are pretty nice as well. And then there are feather boards. Feather boards help keep your stock pushed against the fence, similar to these stock guides. So if you don't have a set of stock guides, this is the next best thing. I made a video with like 5 different jigs on how to use these in various ways to keep vertical pressure, horizontal pressure, but these bow feather boards are fantastic. And because they are made of that EVA foam, if it does get into the blade, it's not going to throw chunks of shards of plastic back at you. It's just foam. It's not going to injure you. as long as you got your eye protection on. One of the great things about these bow feather boards is the fact that these inserts are replaceable, so if you do damage them, you can just buy a replacement. Because they're foam, they're not going to mar your wood, but at the same time, they give plenty of pressure against the fence to help prevent some kickback, as well as keep it tight against the fence so your cuts are accurate. Now, if you want to take this saw, or any table saw really, to the next level, one of the most popular products I've shown recently is the bow extender fence. I love this product. This is one of the most genius products that come out in 2023. It attaches to any table saw, just clamps right to the fence. Even these job site saws. And what makes this thing so awesome is it gives you in-feed and out-feed support, and that's where you need it most on these, especially these small saws that have a small tabletop on them. As you can see, I was able to cut very long boards with this saw, with the bow extender fence on there, and it gives you that out-feed support that you need so much, because you don't want those falling off the back. It's just unsafe, and it damages your lumber and all kinds of stuff. With this fence, you also get that ability for that vertical feather board there that keeps that board pressed down toward the table. You can also put that bow feather board on the outside, putting horizontal pressure on there, and you just get really, really accurate cuts with this system. And for the price of what you're getting, it just makes the table saw that much better. Betsy pipe clamps. I showed these in a video, and you loved them because you can really stock up on clamps. They're not overly expensive for what you're getting. And then you can add the pipe to it, depending on what size the project is, for cutting boards, tabletops, literally anything. You can get a pipe long enough for this. You can get pipe at your local home store, or you can get them on Amazon with these clamps, add them in the cart with them. Now, these are 36-inch clamps. I find these to be about perfect for cutting boards and charcuterie boards, things like that, and they work so well. These are so inexpensive as far as clamps go. They're extremely well made, Betsy brand, and then you can really stock up on clamps. I think most woodworkers should get these well before they get parallel clamps, because of the cost benefit you're getting with these versus how much parallel clamps really cost. As silly as it is, I get asked about this all the time, and it's one of the more popular products I've shown. It's this pencil. This is a Graph Gear 1000 by Pentel. I keep one in my pocket right there all the time. I have a couple laying around on the workbench. You can get them in different sizes, but I like these because they fit in the holes of those squares that we talked about, just for scribing lines and things. Mechanical pencil. I like the 0.9 lead because it doesn't break as often, but you can get the 0.7 if you want a finer detail. Yeah, they cost a little more than a number 2 pencil. But what I found is, because I paid a little more for these, I actually keep up with them. And because I can keep it in that pocket, I always got one on me. The best work clothes that I've ever purchased, and I have purchased multiple pairs of these now, are the True Work pants. I have them on in almost every video, probably every video over the last year. You can go back and look and tell me if I'm wrong. I love these. They have so many pockets. They have a pocket for your phone. This is an iPhone 15 Pro Max in a case. Goes right in there. I keep it right there all day. Got a pencil pocket. I mean, who doesn't want a pencil pocket? You got cargo pockets, zipper pockets, back pockets, and they are very, very comfortable to wear. They flex well. Like, these are very good pants. This is a T2 line. They're a little bit thicker than the T1s. The T1s are perfect for hot climates, summertime. That's what I wear during the summer. The T2 is what I wear during the mild winters of Arkansas. They have them in a bunch of different colors, and they just come out with these. These have knee pads in them, built in, that you can take in and out. So if you're a roofer, or if you work on flooring or anything where you have to be on your knees a lot, you may want to get a pair of these to try out. These are very comfortable, and with the removable knee pads, like knee savers right there, brothers. You gotta check these out. It even tells you which way goes up, so you're not gonna be confused when you stick them back in there. Easy in, easy out for washing. These are my favorite work pants I've ever purchased, and I've purchased a bunch of them now, shorts and pants. One of the more popular products I showed was a knockoff, dare I say, of the Pellini pocket rule. Now, these three come in a set, and they're less than $30 if I remember right. Very inexpensive pocket rules, and these are pretty nice, actually. I did a whole video on the Woodpeckers versus other tools that kind of line up with them or are very, very similar to them. And this 3 pocket rule set was one of the most popular ones that I showed. I think they sold out pretty quickly. They're back in stock. If you want to get a good set of pocket rules for the shop and you don't want to break the bank, this is a good option. It has that nice stop on there, as well as just pretty well made. They're anodized aluminum. They work pretty good. I like them. If you want the best of the best, get the Pellini. I love these. One thing every woodworker should have is a flush trim saw. Just the way it is. I think it's a rule somewhere. Probably rule 203, if I had to guess. This is a flush trim saw. This is a Japanese made by Suizan. It's one of my favorite makers of saws. I have a dovetail saw, 2 dovetail saws, and this one from them. I like this one because it has a hardwood teeth on one side, softwood on the other. This is really great for cutting off dowels, small parts, all kinds of stuff to have in the shop, and they're very inexpensive. You should have one of these. One of the greatest upgrades for the shop this year for me personally was this DeWalt with the bird helix helical head. This thing is butter smooth. It cuts really nice, planes bores down really nice, very smooth finish when you're done. It is an expensive upgrade. If you already have a DW735 or a lot of other planers actually, you can purchase just the bird helix head to install in there. There's quite a bit of difference in the 3 or straight knife version of your planers versus the bird helix helical head version. Now basically what's happening is the straight knives are chopping the wood when it cuts it, where a helix head, because those knives are individual, little square knives are turned at an angle, you're getting more of a shearing action, and it just makes things much smoother. If I had to guess just by feel, it's about a 220 grit feel versus when it comes out with a straight knife, probably 120 grit, maybe a little less. But as far as upgrades go in the shop, this was one of the best. One of the best budget option tools that I purchased and reviewed on the channel this year was the Skill router and router table combo, usually around $200-ish, give or take. This is a very good router, plus you get the router table, especially if you do a lot of small parts, boxes, trays, etc. This will be invaluable to you. You'll be using this all the time. And it's well built. I really appreciated the way it was built. Now the fence isn't the greatest on this as far as if you're looking to joint things with it. I don't think you're going to be able to do that with this router table, but if you just need a fence to set up stops, etc., or just set up distance so that you can route rabbits and dados, etc., it'll work perfectly fine. It's just an offset feature on, say, jointing things. It just didn't work that great. But as far as the router and the router table, the router has plenty of power for one, and then the router table is well made. I like the top on it. Everything glid. It slid on there real smooth. The DFM small carpenter square, made in the USA, half the price of the Woodpeckers Delve square. This is a very good square. It's one of the ones I use the most in the shop. It's 3.5 inches. It'll scribe across a 2x4. It's just a well-made, and you can get them multiple colors. So if you don't like this color, you can pick your own color there. These have a lot of cool features built in too. You still get those scribe holes so you can scribe lines. It also has a place where you can drop pins in to draw quick angles. It's just a really good square that's going to last you a lifetime. The easiest upgrade you can make to your table saw is absolutely the blade. The blades they send with most table saws are absolute trash. Even the stock blade that came on the saw stop is not that great. They're trash. They just throw them in there because they can. I don't know. Most table saws are like that. With the exception of the DeWalt job site saw I have here, this blade's actually pretty good for what you're getting. Now there's several different blades to choose from out there, and if you start looking, it gets confusing on what is the best blade for you. I'm gonna give you my picks from good, better, best. Good, a lot of people will kind of frown on this, but the Diablo line of blades are very good for what you're paying for them. They're very inexpensive, and they last a decent amount of time. Now, they will not last as far as sharpness goes as long as some of these other brands, but if you just want one that's in a good budget range, these are good blades. I ran them for years on my old Delta table saw. Kind of the middle of the road, the one that I really go with the most, the one I think most people should buy is the CMT Chrome Edition blades. I've been running these for a couple of years now, especially a good 50, 60 tooth, 40 tooth all-purpose blade. These are fantastic blades. In that tooth range, 40 to 60 is kind of a combo tooth, so you can do cross cuts and rip cuts and not really have to worry about much tear out. If you're doing a lot of cross cutting or sheet goods, then 80 tooth or so would be better. But for most of us, the 40 to 60 tooth range is perfect. I usually keep a 40 tooth blade on my table saw in most conditions, 40 to 50 tooth depending on which one I can find on sale. There are some really good high-end blades too if you're doing a lot of work, especially like production work, or if you just want to buy once, cry once, get the best of the best. There's two here that I have. I've used this Force blade before. I think it compares really closely to the CMT line. I really wasn't overly impressed with it. One thing that I have liked though is the Ridge Carbide. They did send me this to try out. I've been running it on the table saw for a few weeks now, and I've been very impressed with the quality of this blade, and it's made right here in the USA and by a good small company. So far I like it. I'll link to all of those in the description. You can make your decision on what works best for your saw. While we're on the topic of blades, if you don't have a good dado set, I bought this one myself a couple of years ago, and it has been an absolute awesome thing to have as far as a table saw, especially if you start doing half laps or you're cutting dados. This dado set is absolutely necessary as an upgrade, and not really bad for the price. It'll save you way more time than what you're actually spending. A miter gauge, even this saw stop costs almost $4,000, comes with an embarrassingly bad miter gauge. I don't know why they cheap out on this stuff, but you can get an upgrade, which I did. I purchased this one. This is an Incra V27. This is a very good miter gauge for the price. It's a simple design. You can put a faux fence on it if you want. What I like about the Incra V27 is it fits in a standard T-slot, so it'll work on this job site saw as well as the bigger cabinet saw. But this is one of those tools that you will never regret buying, and it's less than $100. I think they're around $80 or so, depending on the day or the deal you get. This is a good upgrade to make for your miter saw. This is the KREG routing guide set. This is a brand new tool from KREG, but this is one of those tools that I think is a game changer, especially if you don't have a router table. Now, a lot of times when you're making woodworking projects like cutting boards, charcuterie boards, or tabletops, things like that, you want to put a round or a chamfered corner on them. This is an easy way to do it. Let me show you. So you can go all the way from a 1/4 inch radius, 1/2 inch, and 1 inch, all the way to a 2 inch round radius on the corner, and then you get 3 chamfered type corners, 1/2 inch, 1, and 2. I do wish there was a little more selection here between the 1/2 and the 2 inch chamfered corner, but you do have a nice selection of round corners, which most of us are going to be using anyway. And you get this nice little case that'll actually keep these organized so you don't lose them, so you can keep them at the router table, in a shop drawer, or anything like that. All you need is a flush trim bit, or sometimes called a pattern bit. I really like this white side set. You can pick this up on Amazon. It has 2 flush trim bits, one with a bottom bearing, one with the top, and then you also get a roundover bit and a chamfer bit for the most common bits you're going to use, and these are excellent bits. They're going to last you a very long time. A lot of radius jigs like this are, well, you have to hold them pretty close to the edge. Your hand's right here next to the jig itself. This I like because it has a knob. It's going to keep my hand away from it, and you can swap these out. You're going to use the same jig every time. And these just snap right into place securely too. Now we got a 1/4 inch radius. These also adjust. You can move these posts up to the next hole if you need to get closer to the edge. So on the long side, I don't need to adjust those posts because both of those are making contact. But on this short side, only one is, and that's going to give me not as much grip as I want. So all you have to do is move this post. These are threaded. You're going to move that down. And now that's going to give me 2 points of contact there, as well as 2 points here. That's a nice secure grip. Now all I have to do is pull back on this and then use my router to go around that edge. If you don't want to hold it and you just want to clamp it down, then a face clamp will work just perfect to hold these in place. I've got my router bit installed. This is that white side we just saw from the pack. And I'm just going to use that top bearing to follow this. That's going to give me that 1/4 inch radius right there on the corner. Man, that worked perfect, perfect. So what if we wanted a bigger radius? We're gonna throw a 1 inch in there. I'm just gonna hold it this time and see how that works. Oh man, hey, I like this. Oh man, the customer decided they don't want to round over on the edge, so now they want that chamfered. Just pull that out, pop the 1 inch chamfer in. Let's run this through. Now that's all right. To use this with the palm router or a trim router or just a regular router, you want to get that bearing that's closest to the router. In other words, that bearing will ride along the edge of the corner radius template. If you're using it on the router table, obviously it would be the other way. You would use the bearing on the other end, like this one. So I got to put chisels in here because they are ridiculously expensive when you start looking at quality chisels. In other words, the Narex Richter line's the one I actually recommend for most people. 2 Cherries, a Sandvik, you name it. There's several other brands out there, but to me, I think best bang for the buck is the Narex brand. There's been a lot of tests and reviews done on these chisels, and they seem to always come out in the upper spots for most people. The main reason you're paying bigger money for chisels like this is the steel that they use. If they use lower quality steel, it doesn't hold an edge. You can't get them flat, and they just dull really fast. Where when you spend a little extra money on really quality chisels, you're getting a nice metal that's really hard, that doesn't dull very fast. It's kind of a happy medium there where it's also not so hard that you can't sharpen them with a fair amount of ease. I have a whole video on sharpening chisels too, but for the most part, you're paying for that happy medium in the perfect metal. There is such a thing where you get, it's not too hard, it's not too soft, Kind of like Goldilocks of chisels. A jointer is one of those tools that when you look at them, they're very expensive for basically two operations they can do, edge and face joint. If you don't have a jointer, there are ways to get around it. I've made a video on how to do this. I'll link that at the end of this video and in the description. But for the most part, this will make your life much easier and make your work much, much faster, which is what this really accomplishes. Speed, efficiency for your shop, especially if you have a board that has a twist in it or even a bow in it, or the edges aren't straight and you're making a lot of panels, cutting boards, things like that. This is where this thing is going to really up the game in your woodworking life, and it makes the price of this tool well worth it in my opinion. But I think every woodworker should have a table saw. Not specifically this table saw, we'll talk about models in just a minute, but a table saw is gonna open up a world of new things for you in your wood shop. Number one, you can rip boards accurately all the way down, which is awesome. You can also build special jigs for these, like crosscut sleds, jointing sleds, tapering sleds, all sorts of things that you can do with a table saw. You can also cut dados and grooves and miters and many, many other things that a table saw offers to your wood shop. The reason I say fifth on the list is because all of those other tools will lead up to the table saw. Now there may be some controversy here, as some people might pick a planer first. So if you're one of those people, let us know in the comments which one you choose and why. Now, as far as brands and models of table saws go, I would steer clear of the very, very cheap table saws, especially the ones that have fences that you can't set to get square. Specifically, one of the Ryobi table saws I've seen, I don't care for it. Harbor Freight made an older table saw that the fence it didn't have the rack and pinion fence, in other words, this gear-driven fence, so it was hard to set square. However, my pick for best table saw for beginners is a Skil table saw that you can pick up on Amazon. I reviewed it a while back. It is an excellent full 10-inch size table saw that is plenty powerful to cut through anything you want. It's got like a 30-something inch rip capacity, and it's just an all-around good saw for the price. Now, if your space is a concern, this DeWalt, it's an 8 1/4 blade. It is a really good, powerful saw, super square and accurate fence, which is one of the main things you're looking for on a table saw. The fence has to stay square to the blade. The blade has to stay square to these miter slots to get accurate results. This one will do that, the Skil will do that, and many other higher end saws, such as the Delta 36725, like I had previously. Now the T2 model replaced that. That's the best table saw under $1,000 in my opinion, if you're looking for a table saw. Or what I like is the SawStop because of that safety technology. But if your budget doesn't allow that, these other options are good as well. Number one on the list is the KREG multi-purpose project blocks. If you've seen the channel before, you know I've used these Rockler bench cookies a bunch, and they're work supports, and these are very similar, but with an added bonus. Let me show you. The great thing about these is they come in a 4-pack. And if you've ever worked on anything, you know you need 4 to support it properly. And the great thing about these are very similar to a bench cookie. They have this rubber grip built into the top and the bottom, so you can actually turn them either way. It doesn't really matter. And when you put your stock on there, if you're sanding that, or if you're laying out something, whatever you need to do with that, it's going to be secure and sturdy and not slip. If you've seen me use these Rockler bench cookies before, you've probably seen me use these finish cones that snap on top. That's just another added buy to buy for these. They work well, but that's just something else to keep up with. What's great about the KREG brand, this has an integrated paint cone. All you have to do is press this little push button on the side and it raises right up. Now you got a built-in paint cone that you can use to support your stock, especially when you're using clear finishes. Let me pop them all up, I'll show you. If I put a clear finish on the one side of this and I didn't want to damage that finish, that's what these little points are for. You just set it down on there, and now I can put finish on the top while also protecting the finish on the bottom. One thing I really like about the KREG blocks with the paint tip is that's rubber on top, or some type of rubber plastic, something that's similar to the grippy material. The problem with these is they're plastic, they're hard plastic, so when you actually put your workpiece on there, if you press down, it can actually put a detent or some type of little divot into your workpiece, especially on softwoods. This shouldn't do that because it has a softer material. It doesn't give, in other words, it's not squishy, but it's just it's less likely to mar, scuff, or scratch. Number 2 on the list, Carter Products Fast System. It's a fence alignment system tool. These things are great for lining your fence to your bandsaw blade, or you can use them at the table saw or the router table. Let me show you. I'll show you how to use these on the table saw and the router, but I want to show you the bandsaw first because that's what they're specifically made for. You can see on the back here they have a cutout or a dado in there. And they also have magnets that are inset, and the magnet is so that it sticks to the blade. The dado or the cutout is so that the teeth have a place to basically go into, because you know a bandsaw's teeth basically exaggerated looks like that. So if we didn't have that cutout, then the teeth would throw off the square. Now if you have a bandsaw, you know this thing gets knocked out of square quite often. And if it is out of square, that's one great thing about these blocks. When you move that fence over, you're gonna see it pretty obvious right there that we have some adjusting to do. And that's what's great about those blocks. Now I can just basically use the adjustment on the bandsaw fence to get everything nice and square again. Just a little more. And then I can tighten that down. Look at there, we've got a very fast setup, extremely fast. I was able to square that blade up with that fence at a 1/2 inch. Now I can cut. We've got 1/2, 3/8, quarter, 3/16, and a 1/8 inch block. Of course, if you wanted to stack a 1/2 and say a quarter, we're gonna get a 3/4 inch block that we'll be able to set 3/4 of an inch. Because these have that magnet on the back, you can see I can easily store them on the bandsaw either up top or more likely down here on the bottom just for vibrations purposes. They'll stay there. They're not gonna come off of there. So it's just a great place to store them, and they'll always be handy right here at the bandsaw. Let's see what else they can do. If you've watched this series of videos, you know I am a sucker for setup blocks. I love them because they make your life so much easier and faster. You can use these on the table saw. This is the 1/2 inch. You're just gonna move it over next to the blade. Lower your blade, and then just by sight and feel, you can set these up and get that perfect 1/2 inch height to cut those dados, those grooves, whatever you need to do. And like we did on the bandsaw, you can actually set these on top of each other and they will snap together because those magnets are pulling them together. And just like at the table saw, we can use them at the router table or on a fixed base router, is the same way. But you're just gonna lower it down and go by sight and feel, and then now we can cut a 1/2 inch dado using that bit there. So multiple purposes. Every woodworker's favorite item is a clamp, but not just any clamp. This clamp has a very specific purpose because it has that band right there. Let me show you. So a few weeks back, I made a desk on this channel where I actually used these band clamps to hold on some trim while it dried. These are perfect if you don't want any type of hardware showing where you've attached something. In other words, you're just gonna glue an edge trim piece on. These will hold that on there super secure. The grip on these, so the pads where these grip are super strong, so they're not gonna slip off. The band that's used on there is a good strong rubber. It doesn't give really easily, but it also doesn't, it's not too stiff that it's not gonna flex a little bit. You want that to be just right, so when you actually clamp something on there, it's holding pressure against the piece you're clamping it to, and that way that glue dries and gets a nice tight seam. I want you to see how much grip these things have. I can press in on that and put quite a bit of pressure. I can stretch it all the way to the end because it's gripped here and it's pushing pressure that way. One thing to note on the construction of them, it is a metal spring inside there, and the outside is a nice thick plastic. And then these are actually really grippy, these pads here. And then this rubber band that goes in there, you can see where it locks in there. It's not gonna pop out, and then it has a lot of good strength on it. Another great thing are these self-adjusting jaws, so even if you go really wide and have to clamp something, these will adjust and fit parallel. And in case you're wondering, this is just a piece of paper that you can just easily take off. There's other uses for these as well. You can just use them to hold something temporarily in place, like a regular clamp. You can also use them to hold up electrical cords so you don't always trip over them. You can actually get 4 of these for less than $30. That's a huge deal. You're gonna find yourself using them all the time. Next on the list is the FastCat Track Rack. And these are super convenient to have if you have a track saw or tracks for your router, whatever you need it to hang. These are specifically made to fit the tracks of most track saws. It'll fit the Wind track saw, it'll fit the Festool, it'll also fit the KREG, and I'm quite sure it'll fit the Makita, although I don't have a Makita track. On the garage door is where I chose to mount mine. It comes with mounting hardware to actually screw into studs if you wanted to hang them onto the wall, however you want to do that. I chose to put mine on the garage door because this is a place that I wasn't using for anything else, and these tracks and these little racks add very, very little weight, and so it's not going to affect the garage door at all. Basically the way these work is you have a little groove that the track actually sets down in to hold the bottom of it in place, and then at the top there's a little cam that you just twist and it locks that track in. It's not going to go anywhere. You can raise the garage door up, and it's not going to affect it. It's just going to hang there. There's nothing there to come loose. Installation into the garage door was really easy because it came with these sheet metal screws, self-tapping, self-drilling screws. Went right in there, no problem. Just be sure you don't screw through the garage door. Mine had these tubing style braces that go up the length of the door, so I didn't have any issues to worry about there. I've actually had this in here for probably 2 months now. The previous video you just saw of this, I actually recorded a little while back, and I had KREG tracks in there. I had wind tracks that was using there. They work extremely well, and they've held up well. That's what I was kind of waiting on. I made the video of me installing them, how they worked, and then I wanted to wait and see how they held up because they are plastic. And while they are plastic, I can highly recommend these. The only issue I have is when I raise the garage door, my tracks are up there. But I don't do that often because I'm blessed enough to have climate control in here. I highly recommend these if you need to store tracks out of the way. It also includes these little feet if you wanted to store them vertically instead of horizontally like me. You could just attach these and that would catch the bottom of the track. At the time I purchased them, they were like $27. They fluctuate 27 to 29, 30. Every great once in a while I go over 31, so just be aware of that. But they should be under 30. 99% of the time. The number 2 tool on your list that you need, that you didn't know you needed, was these Woodpeckers edge rule. These were actually sent to me as a gift by a viewer. Thank you very much. These are extremely useful tools. I use them all the time now. I did not even realize how useful they were going to be when I got them. I keep the 36-inch one by the miter saw because that's where I would use it the most. But the smaller one, like this 12-inch, and then there's a 24 and then a 6. The 24 and the 36 are my most used, but I do like to have these smaller ones. I keep them in the drawer. These are at a 90 degree, one side is 3/8 inch wide, one side is 3/4 inch wide. And what that does is allows you to hook it onto the corner or the edge of a board. Doesn't matter if you're using 2x4s or 1x or whatever, 4/4, 8/4, doesn't matter. It'll hook onto that and it'll just sit there freehand. What makes these awesome is you can line this up, you can flush it up on one end like that. The measurements are laid out, sloped towards your materials. If we were marking for 5 inches, we can just hold it right there and we got a good accurate mark. We know we got it. The problem with using a tape measure for something like this is we all know that they're curved and sometimes it's just hard to get an accurate mark. Holding the tape measure, it's trying to reel up on you. It's just awkward sometimes. One of the other features I really like about these is they're exactly the same. So they're dead on every time. They're dead accurate. When you're using multiple things to measure with, you're gonna run into problems. I've made a video on tape measures a while back, but no 2 tape measures seem to be the same. Just starting out here with these, you got the 1-inch mark is off on all 3 of these. So if I'm using 3 different tape measures for a project, I'm going to get screwed pretty quick when you start trying to square things up. Even at 2 feet, we can see how far off they are. It's a 1/16 off between those 2, and these are about a 32nd off. And these are 2 co-melon tapes and then a fast cap tape. So you can see pretty quick you can get off when you're trying to do precise work. And in woodworking, when you're building furniture and other items, you want to be accurate. That's gonna matter whether it's set square, whether it's setting flat on the floor and not wobbling. You need accurate tools. Another great feature about these edge rules is because this is 3/8 of an inch on this side, you can actually find center of a 3/4 inch board really quickly. If you're trying to find center on a 2x4, this is 3/4 inch wide, so this is easy to do. You just hold it square on the board, mark up against that edge. You're gonna flip it around. You're gonna use that other edge to do the same thing. We got center of that board every time. These are also made out of aluminum, so they're extremely strong. You don't have to worry about messing them up. They also come with these stop blocks. The blocks are plastic, and I think for the money that you're spending on these should be aluminum as well. They kind of cheaped out on these stop blocks. I don't like that part, but the edge rule itself is an excellent product. These are useful to have so you can make repeated measurements every time. If you're only going to pick up one of these, I recommend the 24-inch. That's the one I use the most often in the shop. If you do get the 12-inch and you wear an apron, a woodworking apron, this thing will fit right in there, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. This is called a dead man switch or an electric foot switch. The way it works is you plug your tool into the foot switch, then you plug your foot switch into the wall. You just step on it. Your tool comes on because it gets power. It's just a disconnect switch that you actually just step on. This foot switch is mainly a convenience. Router tables, drill presses, lathes, scroll saws, or even a band saw if you've got a smaller 110 volt band saw. It's just convenient. You walk up, you step on the gas, you got power. I mean, that's just basically all it is a convenience. Is it kind of a safety feature? It can be if, so I've got this drill press, if I had a bit in there and I'm drilling something, I've got a hand on the crank here, I've got a hand on the workpiece. If something goes wrong at any point, if something gets hung or whatever, and I'm drilling, all I gotta do is just take my foot off the gas, the power stops, and then I can deal with whatever issue I've got. So a lot of people have scroll saws. This is great for that because you can do your work, take your foot off the power, and then reposition, do your work, things like that. 20 bucks or less for this convenience is just, it's kind of a no-brainer. One of the best things you can have in the shop is an accurate rule. You'll use it all the time, and they're not that expensive, especially this one. Let me show you. If you watch the channel, you know I like my rules. Poloni pocket rules, I've got slide rules, I've got all kinds. The layout and measuring, the only thing that matters, honestly, is accuracy. And these are dead accurate every time, every one of their products. This rule is made in the USA, it's Incra, and it's stainless steel. So it's not gonna rust, it's gonna last a very long time. This goes down to 30 seconds. It also has 16th markings all the way across. And if you'll notice, it has holes in it. Can you see that? Those are for your pencil. Unfortunately, my Pica pencil that I love so much won't actually work most of the time in those holes. It'll fit, but you have to get a really sharp lead. So I just picked up this old generic mechanical pencil. So if I was needing to lay something out, you can see every one of those dots right there is a hole. There's a mark there so you can get a pencil lead in there to make a mark. Every one of those slots is also a hole so you can make marks. So if I need to lay out accurate lines that need to be dead accurate every single time, we can use this to mark it 1 inch, 3 inch, 5 inch. Anywhere you want, you can just use those slots to make those marks. I've got tick marks all the way across there. Now I can take a square and square those up, and I know I've got accurate measurement. One thing I do wish is if it was marked on the back side as well. It's not, but it has tons of markings on the front. Truthfully, I was a little bit worried about how thin this thing was, that it would get damaged or I would break it or something. I've had it for several weeks now and I've used it quite a bit and it's held up well. Like the markings are holding up well. I actually like how thin it is because you can get your pencil right next to it and you're making the mark exactly where you need it. Not a whole lot to say about this little thing. It's just awesome. Go get one. I'm telling you, you'll love it. I got to making some charcuterie boards and started using these clamps, and I was like, these things are too good not to share. I'm a fan of Bessie clamps. I love their parallel clamps, but when it comes to F-style clamps, I have found no others better than Jorgensen. And that's really saying something because these are extremely affordable and they're just awesome. You see this Bessie clamp here? This is a 12-inch clamp, same size. The bar's thinner, the handle's thinner. It's just a lighter weight, and they're about the equal price. This Jorgensen brand, not only is it a sweet color orange, but it has a very nice grip on here. This thing is really nice and thick. The older I get, the harder it is to grip things and get your hands on these smaller things and actually get some torque on there, especially when you're putting on things like cauls or you just need that extra clamping pressure. This really helps because the bigger diameter gives you a little bit more torque. The quality of this handle, even comparing it to the Bessie parallel clamp, which is a much more expensive clamp, you can see that this has a nice handle on it. It really does. This one, in my opinion, is even better than that. I mean, it's just high quality. It feels quality. With most all F-style clamps, these pieces right here come off so easily. You'll likely lose those. You can also take these pieces off that cover this bottom part of the clamp if you wish. On the top part, I've taken some Plasti Dip. I made a video on how to do that. Really simple, and that actually gets it a rubber coating on the top of your F-clamps. And I always get asked what type of wood this is. This is leopard wood and Purple Heart, curly maple, walnut. This is a Harbor Freight brand clamp, and I've used these a few times, or several times actually, over the years. And the thing that gets me on these is they bend super easy. You can see this thing is really bent. Every time I go to tighten something down, this bends, and I hardly ever use these unless I'm just running out of clamps. This is thick enough that it's not gonna bend, not easily. I mean, you would have to, I don't know if you could put enough pressure on the clamp to make that bend. It's a really thick, robust clamp. There's not a whole lot I can tell you about an F-clamp. Most people have them. They work well for various applications, and these are some of the best I've used. Highly recommended from me. This is a Pica pencil. What is a Pica pencil? Pica actually has a line of drawing or marking instruments for us woodworkers, and they work really well. And not only that, they got some really cool features. Let me show you. If you're anything like me, You've been buying bags of these little mechanical pencils, but the maddening thing about these is you'll be marking and just like that, the pencil lead breaks so easy on these things. This is actually a 0.7, so it's actually even a thicker lead than the 0.5. The Pica pencil has a lot of features and the lead doesn't break like that. Let me show you. One of my favorite features, if you have an apron, then you can obviously put this in the apron. You can put this in there. This little clip actually has some little teeth that kind of grab on to your pants, so they're not going to go anywhere. And you can actually pull the pencil out, use it, and then put it back, and it's going to be there. It's kind of silly. That's one of my favorite things because it makes it so convenient to have on you. So this is the Pica Dry. It's just a pencil, and you can see the lead. You think it's kind of a thicker lead up near the pencil itself, but it comes to a point. It actually has a sharpener built into this carry case, as you can see there. All you do is stick that thing in there and rotate it, and you have a sharp pencil. It's super easy, and it's very convenient they built that in to the holder. And this, like any other mechanical pencil, all you do is push the button down to extend the lead. If you're using regular pencils to mark on maple or pine or anything like that, you can see that they make a mark and you can actually see them. When you're working with Purple Heart or walnut, sometimes it can be hard to see those marks, especially on the darker woods. The Pica, pop that off, you can take the lead out. Don't dump yours on the floor like I did. Has refills. You can get it in red or yellow or regular graphite color. Let's go with yellow. It marks on Purple Heart. Super clear. You'll be able to see that all day long, and then on walnut all day long. Pica has other products as well, like this deep hole marker. The nib on it, on the shaft, is much deeper than the regular standard pencil. So if you needed to get down into the bottom of a hole and make a mark, you could do that with this. If you pick up a Pica pencil, pick up pencils. If you pick up a Pica pencil, also pick up one of these multi-use packs that has the yellow, the red, and the refills in there for standard lead. Now, one thing I like to have is a set of brass setup blocks. These allow you to kind of stack them. You can add a 1/2 block and a 1/4 block. You got 3/4 or any other combination you want. 1/2 and 3/16, 11/16, right? So you can combine these in any orientation you want to get the exact setup that you want and make sure that it's going to be exact every time. And all you're going to do here is just use that by feel till you get that router bit at the exact right height. My personal favorite are these brass setup blocks from Tay Tools because they have the measurements stamped into them, and a lot of them don't. They're just brass blocks at a certain dimension. These are accurate and easy to read. Next up is the Rockler setup gauge. This is a really handy gauge to have if you have a router table. It can be used on a regular router, but it really shines on the router table. A couple of reasons. Number one, it has 2 slots, one for 1/2 inch, one for 1/4 inch. That puts that bit right in the center of this gauge. It allows you to set up the fence exactly center of that bit, and that's one thing I really like about it, especially if you're cutting slots, different things like that. It's just an easier way to set it up. It also has a depth gauge, which you can use on a regular router, but you could also use that on your router table to set it. So if I was trying to cut a 1/4 inch deep slot with this router bit, it's easy to set that up. And if you're not in America using Freedom units, it does have millimeters on there, so you can use those as well. So it's dual purpose for dual places. Next up are edge guides. If your router didn't come with an edge guide, 99.9% chance that there is an edge guide available for them. Buy it today. These are one of the most used accessories for any router, in my opinion. I love having an edge guide for various work, cutting grooves, dados, or dovetails, or whatever you're cutting off the edge of a board. I use these all the time, and it's one of the main things I love about having a router. It's like cutting the slots to put on the tabletop fasteners. That's what I set the edge guide, or the depth of that cut, away from the edge of the board. There's just multiple uses for these things, and if you don't have one already, go ahead and pick one up. Typically, the edge guides you get with your trim router or even a budget model router are just going to be plain unadjustable, other than the slide that go in and out of the slots of your router. One thing I like about the DeWalt edge guide that I bought with the DeWalt is it has a fine tune right here, so I can get the measurement close as far as sliding it in and out. And then when I get it where I need it or close to, I can dial that measurement in. That if I need to cut a groove or a dado at the exact right spot, this helps me do that. That's why I recommend that DeWalt fixed and plunge based router as one of your first routers you should buy. I've got a whole video about that. I'll link that in the description. Next on the list is the famous 1, 2, 3 setup block. I use these all the time for various reasons. I just use it on the mini router table to kind of center up my template that I was using. Use them at the table saw. I've got 25 plus ways to use these in your shop. A whole video about that I'll link to in the description and the pinned comment if you want to check that out. These are truly handy as a shirt pocket in the shop. and they are ridiculously inexpensive for what you're getting. Usually you can get 2 of these for right around $20, give or take $1 or 2. As silly as it is are safety glasses. Now these are 3M brand safety glasses. I like them because they don't fog up if you're wearing a mask. They come in dark tint if you work outside. They also come in kind of a medium tint, just in case you just kind of want to dim the lights a little bit. And then of course they come in clear. Now the clear ones are the ones I grab most often. And there's a couple of reasons again why I like these. They're comfortable, they're flexy, bendy, and they're really soft so they don't press in on your side of your head or your ears. And if you wear masks like these dust masks from RZ Mask, these don't fog up like other safety glasses that I've worn in the past. So that's why I like these, and they're extremely comfortable. You will forget you're wearing them. I've got a drawer full of different brand, but these were sent to me as a gift from one of my viewers, and they have been the most used safety glasses in the shop. And if you ever just want to feel cool, you just throw these on. This is a set of eye gauging setup gauges, just like the, well not just like, but similar to the digital one. These have a different feature though that the digital one don't. Now these do come in a nice little, I say nice, it's a plastic case, but it does have nice foam to protect these. So if you throw these in a drawer, you can toss them around. They're not going to get damaged in any way. They also are the anodized aluminum with that laser etched markings on there. They also have the graduated steps on each side to easily set up fence distances or even blade heights, bit heights, drill depths, etc. One thing I like about these gauges is the fact that whatever it reads here is how far off the surface it is there. So you see I've got it set at about 1/4 inch. When I lock that in, it is 1/4 inch up off the ground there. You can even check it against itself. So if you're laying out half laps or anything like that, that'll be useful, and just checking depths of things, etc. So you can check the depth of the hole at the top, and now you've already got it set on the bottom so you can set your blade or bit height there. Super handy. One of the major features this has that the digital version don't are these notches right here. There's a 1/4 inch notch here and a 1/2 inch notch there. Where that is specifically handy is at the router table. That's basically going to give you the center of your bit, whether that's 1/4 or 1/2. If you're using a 1/2 shank bit, then you can use that as a guide to get the halfway distance of the blade or the bit. And if you're using a 1/4 shank bit, then you can use that to get the halfway distance of the 1/4 shank. Now I can set that distance to be exactly halfway of my bit. And that's great for routing grooves and things like that when you need them to be precisely where you want them. Really the only limiting thing on these is the fact that it's about a 2-inch depth is all you're going to get. So if you need to set your saw blade up at say 2.5 inches on your table saw, this really isn't the gauge for that. But these on the router table or just the regular fixed base, plunge base router, these are nice. The Milwaukee Fastback 6-in-1 tool. I've shown this once before. If you've watched the channel at all, you see this in my pocket for the last several months. Since I bought this, it stays in my pocket. I use it all the time. It's a good little utility knife. One, it locks in place, so you're not going to worry about cutting yourself like that, but it'll close up. It's got a bottle opener there. It also has a fold-out driver on this end, which you can switch around. It comes with a Phillips flathead. It's just an all-around really good, and that locks also, so it's not going to collapse on you when you're trying to drive a screw or take something loose. It's just an all-around good little handy tool to have in your pocket. And it's super easy to change out those blades. Actually, I bought mine in the 2-pack. One's just a regular utility knife, and then the other one has the screwdriver on the end for about $20-ish. Most of the time, you can catch these on sale all the time. Extremely good deal, and a tool you'll love to have on your person at all times. This is the Incra Tiny T. This is one of the coolest little rules you'll ever see. Almost made a wrap. This little tiny T is about 4 inches long, give or take. This will slide along this little piece of T-track. If you did want to remove it from the track, it's really easy to do so. And these are just bolted on, so you can actually unscrew those. If you just wanted to use this as a layout tool without this piece, you can certainly do that. One thing I'd like to point out is this T-track has a ledge on the left side that actually makes this blade will contact the back, and that's going to keep everything nice and square. If you don't put it on that way, if you put it on backwards and tighten it down, it's actually going to bend your blade because it has to come over that little notch there. So be sure to put it in correctly, just like this. If you're going to use this like as a square or marking device, from where it makes contact with the wood out to the ends about 3 7/8 inches long. The outside edge all the way to the end is 4.5 inches. And the reason I use my measuring tape is because it only goes out to 3 inches. It leaves space for this end rule, which is very handy for something I'll show you in a minute. The blade of the Tiny T rule is stainless steel, so you're not going to have to worry about it rusting. It has various scales on here that you can actually put your pencil in to make the mark. On this line is 30 seconds. On this line is 1/16, and then a 30-second again. There's actually 1/64 marks across here, so you can get really, really precise. And then also 30 seconds up here. As a matter of fact, on the 64th, you can see it actually goes 1/64, 2/64, 3/64. So you can really dial in any precision you need. And on the end, you also have 30 seconds of an inch for your end scale from 0 to 2 inches. You can draw parallel lines using those marks that are pre-cut into the rule. You just drop your pencil on the line and then you can draw that line. I've shown several setup blocks before, but because this has this little tiny piece of T-track on there, you can actually set this up upright. It'll stand on its own even though it is really thin, and you can actually use that to set the depth of your saw blades. Another great feature is you can actually use it on your router table to set the depth of your router bits. You can also use it on fixed base routers to set the depth of the bit on these. I really like the cutout windows. You can see through and actually set the depth of the router bit by looking and seeing where it's at through the scale. This is a really, really affordable precision woodworking tool you should pick up and put it in your toolbox. Next on the list is a Wera Craft Form screwdriver ratchet, but it has a secret. Let me show you. So I have a whole set of screwdrivers that I use around the shop from time to time, or I did use around the shop until I got this. This basically takes the place of all of them, especially when I need to do small tasks inside the house that I just need to come out and get a screwdriver and go back in. This is awesome because, as you can see, it looks like a screwdriver. However, right here you see an L and R, and what that is a ratcheting. So you can basically go lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. In the center, it locks it both ways, so you can use it as a normal screwdriver. I like that feature that you can lock it out so it doesn't twist on you. And because it is a 1/4" drive, you can use any bits that you have already to use as a screwdriver. If you notice, on top there's a button. Push that button and it reveals all of the bits that you're going to be using around your house for the most part. You got Phillips and flathead. Or you can swap those out for star drive or anything like that if you use those around the house. It's got a nice strong magnetic tip there, so those aren't going to fall out easily. You have to really pull on them, get them to come out, and it just works. That's all you want in a screwdriver, especially for small tasks around the house. You'll grab this, you'll grab that all the time. This little screwdriver is handy as a shirt pocket. Next on the list is a fast cap magnetic square. This thing is super handy to have, especially for the table saw and bandsaw. I'm using this all the time. As a matter of fact, I leave it sticking to the bandsaw because it has those magnets, and I always have a square out there so I can square that blade up if I ever tilt that table. This thing is awesome. Let me show you. On one side, you have imperial measurements. On the other side, it has metric. So it includes both sides of the fence there. If you like metric, then you're covered. If you like imperial, America, you got it covered there too. It also has 2 rare earth magnets on the bottom, so it's going to stick to cast iron and other metal objects, such as this toolbox. So if you need a square around the toolbox and you're always losing it, it's a great way to keep up with it. It also has nice shoulders on there, so you can use it just like you would, say, a speed square or even the Delve square or DFM square that I've shown before. That nice shoulder there just helps keep everything nice and square. And speaking of square, it is accurate as it can be. You can use it to set bit heights, blade heights. You can use it to square up your fence on your table saw. It's just so many uses to have. It's a really nice little tool. Basically, I use the magnetic handles to hang hearing protection on the bandsaw, or over at the dust collector, I hang my flex hose on there that I use to go around the shop to different tools. And then also you can use them to hang blades on. Because of their unique shape, that U-shaped, you're able to basically hang anything on them. It basically makes a magnetic hanger for you in your shop. You'll find tons of uses for these things, and they're super cheap. I also have these magnetic trays that I used to keep them in the drawer, but now that I have my tool wall, it's metal, so I stick them up there. But they're perfect for keeping up with drill bits or driver bits, odd and end screws, bolts, things like that when you're working on things. These things are awesome to have in the shop. And of course, if your drawers are so super organized like mine here, these are perfect for that because you're able to keep up with the most important things, and then the rest of the junk's just in there. And finally, you can get a pack of these rare earth magnets. You can stick them on anything magnetic, metal, and they work extremely well. I use them all around the shop at the drill press to keep up with that chuck, because if I don't, I'm gonna lose it. It's always great to stick it right back on there. Also, you can use them anywhere. You can put them on a bandsaw and put a clamp up there, or at the table saw, that's where I use to keep my remote for my dust extractor. As way I can keep up with it. It doesn't get knocked off on the floor. I don't lose it. It's just a great way to keep up with metal things. A Rockler silicone project mat. Now if you do glue ups, like most of us woodworkers do, this thing is great for protecting your surface from getting wood glue on it. It's like your workbench that's wood, you don't want glue on it. The glue will not stick to this. It'll dry on it, peel it right up. It's perfect for that. Or if you use like resins, epoxy resins, it won't stick to this either because it's silicone. You see here where I recently done a resin pour, and I got a little bit spilled over onto this. It didn't get on my workbench because of this, but it just comes right out of there. That's dried black resin. It's got these grooves, so even if something does spill, it gets down in those grooves, so you still got a flat surface. Like all that resin is under the surface. Look how easy it comes up. Just peels right out of there. This is Type Bond 3 wood glue. We're gonna smear that on there. My favorite push block that I've bought to date. Not to be confused with the Gripper Ripper. I like this one, and I showed it on a video not too long ago for making thin cuts and different things on the table saw. This is a push block that has a very unique feature that I absolutely love, and I'm using it all the time now, especially on the jointer, sometimes on the router table and the table saw, but mostly I use it on the jointer. If you saw the video where I recommended the Bench Dog push blocks, I still love these. I still use these all the time. I like the surface area. I like the big grip. However, this one has these tabs that come down, and they are so useful you would not believe it. If you use the jointer a lot, you know when you're pushing the stock through with regular push blocks like this, they work most of the time, but there are times when you get down on this end and you start losing a little bit of grip. Because these are automatic too, they just automatically fall in and up, so you can set it on the top and use it like a regular push block. But if you push it to the back, this actually catches. It'll catch the edge of that board, and when you're pushing it through, it basically gives you another point of contact to help you push through the joint or the cut. Absolutely awesome, and these are by far the most useful push blocks I've got. If for whatever reason you don't want these automatically coming down, all you have to do is just put a little bit of pressure on them, and they'll actually snap back up in place, and they'll stay up in the up position, and they won't be in your way. Actually, they've never gotten in my way being automatic. So as you can see, I just got this other one in because I love this thing so much. I went ahead and ordered another one for this specific purpose on the bandsaw. So the reason I specifically wanted 2 of these was so if I could resaw on the bandsaw. You don't always use the fence when you're cutting. You can actually just follow this line I have on there. That's what I'm gonna do now, but this will allow me, the unique feature of that flat piece that's on one side allows these to stand up on their own. And of course, these hooks back here will keep my fingers from even getting close to the blade at any point. So let's do it. These add like extra safety to that bandsaw because I am very nervous about my hand or fingers getting close to that very sharp and very dangerous blade. I don't want any nips or tucks or anything like that with that blade, and this will keep my hands away from that for that specific purpose. That is well worth the price of these. By far my favorite push block to date. Number 1 on the list is the Saw Set Pro. This thing is awesome if you do any type of miter cuts anytime. This is a great little tool to have. It looks like the old school protractors we used to use way back when I was in grade school, but it has unique features on it that makes setting your saw up for the cut super easy. On one side of the Saw Set Pro, you'll see that it says single, and on the opposite side, you'll see that it shows double miter, and there's a reason for that. Let me show you. All you need to use this is a T-bevel in the Saw Set Pro. If I needed to know what that angle was I needed to cut for both pieces, in other words, a double miter, we're gonna use the double miter side. We're gonna take our T-bevel. It says place T-bevel here, so you're gonna set that on the bottom of the T-bevel, or on the bottom of the saw set. And you're gonna move this over until it touches that piece right there that actually sticks up. That's basically a catch to tell you where to stop at. That's showing us a 10-degree angle to set the saw. From there, we're gonna move the saw over to the 10-degree angle, lock it down. A perfectly matched miter corner, simple as that. Check that out. It'll also easily find single angles. When I was building this miter station, I thought about putting angle drawer faces on here so that it stayed flush instead of being inset. I actually preferred the inset look, so I went this way. But if I had wanted to put that angle on there, then each side of those drawer faces would have needed to be angled. How would I find that angle easily? Simple as this. You'll take your T-bevel, line it up on this outside edge as well as on that inside edge. That's our angle. Going to be using the single side of the SawSet Pro. It says place T-bevel here. In other words, on the bottom. Looking at about a 22.5-degree angle. So if I use a square piece and put it at that angle, you see that it would look kind of funky right there on that edge. However, when I cut that 22.5-degree angle, if I put that drawer face on, then you can see that it would look really nice and finished. This thing takes quick work out of trying to figure out angles and math, and it's just a super simple tool that works extremely well. And it's from a small family-owned business out of Canada. So if you ever deal with angles at any time, one of these would be handy to have in the toolbox. If you do a lot more trim work, there's a few instructional videos on SawSet's website that you can check out for yourself. I'll link their site down below. Is clamps, and not just any clamp, a very unique one that I find very useful, under $30. These are two different F-style clamps from Bessie. This is a traditional one. This is the new gear-driven model, and I just love the way they work because they're a space saver. To adjust the clamping, you actually twist this handle that's on the bar itself. So that saves this little bit of space here, and that's what's great about these. Let me show you. If you watch me build this miter station, I had to cut a T-track in the top so that I would have a stop block system. I used a board as a straight edge to guide my router so that I could cut a good straight line. These style clamps wouldn't work because they won't fit under here without contacting the surface below. They also would be in the way if you turn them up this way. However, these clamps, because of their unique design, I was able to slide that right in there, clamp my board down tight, then I could cut that groove with the router. I call these new, but they've been out for a couple years. They act like regular clamps as far as how they slide up and down. They come in various sizes, even the 24-inch, this is a 12, even the 24 inches under $30. I'll link to both. Let me show you something else they can do real quick. These have 450 pounds of clamping pressure, so that's more than enough than you'll ever need for most clamping applications. What's great about the space-saving design is if you've ever used a traditional style clamp to clamp down something flat against a surface, you know how difficult it can be to actually get your hand there to twist this to get a good clamping pressure on that. With the gear drive, you don't have that problem so long as this is tall enough. If it's too short or too thin a material, but 1.5 inch to anything over about 1 inch, you can get a good clamp on. Plenty of room to manipulate the clamp mechanism back here without having to interfere with the table. Just super cool tool. If you work in tight spaces, or you may at some point, these will come in handy. I recommend picking up a couple. If you have a work table that has T-tracks, they can be invaluable to actually hold things down while you're working on them, like sanding, routing, many other different things that you need stuff to stay still while you're working on it. I have a couple of different styles here, but these don't work as good as these. Let me show you. You can see the blue ones have an arch to them, very similar to the gray. But the blue ones use a washer to pivot over that slotted hole. Whereas the Masca brand, basically, I don't know what you call that. It's like a pivot point, and it allows you to get different angles and keep that pressure on the clamp. If you don't have T-tracks on your work surface, they're super easy to install with a 3/4 inch bit. I use T-track clamps all the time. If I was needing to work on the end of this board or to sand this board or whatever I needed for it to be still and not move on me, you can use these in either direction. So if you need a little more reach, you can use the long side. If you need to be a little more clamping pressure straight down, use the shorter side. Typically I use a couple, that way it's held in two different places. Once I get it snug, I can work on this board and it's not gonna move unless I want it to. Like I can really wrench down and pull it, but as far as normal working, you're not gonna need to do that. I mean, it's just gonna be rock solid. Where I found the benefit of these is because of the way they're made. This keeps that even clamping pressure down with that half circle piece that goes into that groove. On taller stock that you need to hold, this is where this really shines because a normal one won't fit as good as this. Let me show you that. While these still work, you can see how the pressure of the clamp is on the front of that washer pushing down. It just doesn't hold as solid. You can also use these on the CNC to hold down your work, although I would be very cautious because these bolts do stick up, so you want to make sure you're not going to hit that when your CNC is moving, and they're aluminum, so make sure they're well away from the cut area. These come in 2 packs for under 30 bucks, and it's just a good value all around. Next on the list is a wood glue hack, trick, something you need for your wood glue. I've used the Glue Bot for years, and while it's a decent product, I wouldn't call it great. One main issue is I always lose the little rubber cap thing, and this tip stops up consistently. All the way down into here, I wind up digging it out. I actually wind up cutting the end of it, and then it just becomes useless, and it's just, there's glue in there, and I never use it. Simple, very cheap fix. Thanks to All Red Woodworking for coming up with this tip. So why condiment bottles? So this is like ketchup and mustard bottles. Glue doesn't stick to plastic, so you're not gonna have to worry about that. It comes out nice and easy. There's no getting stuck on there and all that stuff. And even if it dried right at the tip, all you have to do is take a little something and pop in there, and then you're good to go again. I like how easy the glue flows out of here. You can do real thick beads, you can do thinner beads if you want. Like just however much pressure you're putting on there, you can flood an area, and it's just less mess than the other way. I will say this about the Glue Bot. The only reason I keep it around and deal with the frustration of this tip always clogging up is for vertical gluing. In other words, when I was putting the trim or the face trim on this miter station and things like that, I can hold the bottle upright and squeeze it. The glue, the way when you squeeze it comes from the bottom and out the spout, so you can glue like this. For any other normal applications, I'll be grabbing my glue ketchup bottle. Last but certainly not least, I've heard so much about this stuff, I'm almost tired of hearing about it. But I had to pick up this 3M extract paper that everybody's talking about how amazing it is. It's less than $30 a pack for 50 discs in any grit that you're looking at. Or you can pick up a sample pack like this that has 12 pieces of paper in there with varying grits. Let's see if it lives up to the hype. I've been buying this Festool granite paper, and while it works really well, it's really expensive. This is much less expensive, so if it works even better, that's gonna be a positive in my book. I need some more 120 grit. I also needed some 220, and I got some 320. As you can see, you can see through it because it's that mesh, so it'll still pull the air through there. If you got a dust extractor, it'll match any of the sanders you may have. I'm glad they printed on the back what the grit is, that way you don't get them confused. This little sorter box that I have here, very inexpensive. I'll also link that in the description below. That way it keeps everything organized. I can keep my sanding pads, different grits, everything just in its own separate place. So the way this works, it'll stick to most any of your hook and loop sanding pads that should already be on your sander. Backing is kind of fuzzy feeling, so almost like a hook and loop. We're gonna try it out on this 2x6. That's pretty impressive. Like that was less than the 60 seconds probably. I've been messing around with epoxy, making some epoxy cutting boards or serving trays, things like that. I also have these little hammers I made, and they have quite a bit of epoxy sticking off the back. And one problem with epoxy is it clogs up sandpaper really fast. See what it does with this. You can see where that epoxy dust was, it's gone because it got sucked up in there when I just hit it with that board. Or you can use something like this sanding eraser. These are very inexpensive too, and it'll prolong the life of your sandpaper. Even the feel of the grit, like you can still feel it. A lot of times when you're using regular sandpaper, it gets clogged up. The old pencil test on some quilted maple, try that out. Same sheet of sandpaper we've been using. Now I'm gonna do the other half with the granite 120. So I actually ruined this piece trying to sand that tab off. It's just not made for that. You should have just cut that and then sand because it took all the grit off of it, but that's a little extreme application. Put a new piece on there and it zipped right through it. Because it is hook and loop, it'll work on your sanding mouses as well. I use these all the time. I actually featured this in a previous video, but I think this stuff comes in 3-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch, even bigger than that. But for the most of us, the 5 or the 6 is all you're gonna need. That 5-inch Festool paper, I was paying like $35 or $40 for a 50 pack. This is less than $30, around $20 when I bought this per 50 pack. It's quite a bit of savings, especially on something you're just using up pretty quickly. So I like the 3M cost and I like the performance. I'm switching. One of my favorite Woodpeckers tools is the Poloni pocket rule. I've had the Poloni pocket rule 6-inch for a long time, and I just went ahead and bought this set because I use them all the time. I love this tool. Now, this is a woodworking ruler, as you can see right there. How similar are these? Man, they're strikingly similar. Let's find out which ones measure up. First off, these dupes come in a nice foam packaging. It's going to protect them in the package. I'll put a link to all of these tools that you're going to see today in the description and the pinned comment to help you find them easier if you want to check them out for yourself. Straight out of the box, the Amazon versions, you can tell that the slide rule part of this is quite different. Obviously, the Woodpeckers made in the USA, these made in China. If that matters to you, then obviously the pick will be made in the USA version. On the Poloni pocket rule, you have inches on one side, millimeters on the other. Same thing on the reverse side. However, on the Amazon version, you've got inches on one side, and then the other side has both inches and millimeters. The hardware for the Poloni pocket rule is much nicer than, say, the Amazon version. A little shinier, just looks better in my opinion. Also, the anodized aluminum is a little heavier here versus the Poloni pocket rule. Not a lot of difference, but it's probably the bigger slide. The Amazon version on top is slightly thicker than the Woodpeckers on the bottom, which probably also adds to that weight. Not probably, it does. The Woodpecker version is exactly 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch thick, so you can actually use that blade thickness for various things, so setting up things or measuring, etc. Whereas the Amazon version is slightly over that at 0.155. One feature I've always liked about the Poloni pocket rule is the fact that you can stand it on edge just by removing the slide and putting it inside this slot. And this works great if you just want to use that end scale there, which on one side is inches, on the other side, again, millimeters. The Amazon version does virtually the same thing. You can remove the slide, put it in there, and it'll stand on edge. You've got inches on one side and then millimeters on the other. One thing I've always appreciated about Woodpeckers is their attention to accuracy. As you can see, I've got the Amazon version just kind of lining them up so they all start at the same spot, and all the way across, doesn't matter which one of them, they all line up perfectly. 6 inches is 6 inches there, is 6 inches on the third one. And then you can always take this all the way out to the final 8 inches or millimeters if you're looking at 200, 210. They're all exactly the same all the way across. Now, will the Amazon version do the same? Let's line up the Amazon version and see if it's the same. We're going to use the Poloni pocket rule as our edge. Then we're going to go across here. These two are virtually the same all the way through 6 inches. However, out here at 8 inches, you can see this one is slightly longer by just a fraction. I mean, it's very, very minor, but if that matters to you, I think that's where you're going to start seeing a little differences here. They're not exactly the same as the Woodpeckers brand, and it is so minor. It's just a half of a millimeter or something like that. Another thing you should be able to use these for is a square. When you tighten these two thumb screws down, everything should square up. So we're going to check that now. This is the Poloni pocket rule, and then just to the side of that, we'll put P on this side. Just to the side of that will be the Amazon version. On the Amazon, perfectly square. On the Poloni, perfectly square. So no difference there. Round one, I think the Amazon ones are a very good value for what you're getting if you want some pocket rules like this. And that's coming from a Woodpeckers fan. These are pretty nice. Now, would I buy these normally? If I'm looking at pocket rules, I'm still probably going to go with the Woodpeckers made in the USA. Also, you know, the 1/8 inch thickness there, I use that sometimes to set things up, and they do have a hole for hanging if that matters to you. But for the most part, if you're on a budget and you want some really good pocket rules, check these out. Man, they're not bad. Now, the pricing difference in the Poloni pocket rule versus the Amazon brand, which is called Violet Fox Woodworking Rulers. The Poloni pocket rule set cost me $159.99 for the set. That's from Amazon. Now, the Violet Fox was $28.99. That is a giant difference in price in those two, and not a lot of difference in quality, in my opinion, as far as what you're getting. Now, you also go back to the USA made versus China made. You figure that out on your own. I love having a T-square in the shop. I've had a 24-inch T-square for a long time, but these things are crazy expensive for what they are. They are extremely nice. They have some really cool features of it, but I found one on Amazon that's very close to the Woodpeckers brand for much less. Let's see if it measures up. When I got this 12-inch Woodpecker T-square in, it comes just like this, pre-assembled, ready to roll, perfectly square. However, the Amazon version, some assembly required. I don't like that. I would much prefer them to assemble this at the factory. I'm assuming they did this for the shipping reasons. Took less than a minute to put that together. First thing I noticed on these two is the fact that the length of the blade is much thinner than the Woodpeckers, and the shoulder part is also much, much shorter. They assemble basically the same way, but again, this comes from the factory. One good thing about this is the fact that it'll only go on one way, so you can't reverse it. So if you try to put it on the other way, you can't get it wrong. Both of those have the shoulders on there, which I really like that is included on the Amazon version. I use these all the time, especially when laying out sheet goods. Because of that shoulder, it rests right there. So if it didn't have that, it would have a tendency to tip. But with both of these having those shoulders, those are on there. Checking accuracy, we use the Poloni pocket rule. We'll line up, make sure the 1-inch mark is lined perfectly. And then we'll run it all the way out to 12 and see how well they line up. Again, perfect match on the Woodpecker. Do the same thing on the Amazon version. We've got lined up the 1-inch all the way across to 12. Are we accurate? Dead on. Now, are they square? Because that's really all that matters on a T-square. So we're gonna measure these the same way as we did the previous. One observation right here is the fact that this part of the T-square on the Woodpeckers is perfectly flush with the material that you're marking, where this one is slightly elevated so you can't mark past it. I think the Woodpeckers is nicer in that area. That Amazon version, perfectly square. Woodpeckers version, perfectly square. Now T-squares are great little layout tools, especially like these both have those center marks down through there, or center holes, so that you can drop your pencil in and say you want to describe a 3.5-inch parallel line. These are super easy to do that with. These are probably some of the better setup tools for this application versus some of the other ones, because of how wide this shoulder is, that everything glides and just you get an accurate mark every time. 3.5 and 3.5, we'll see if there's any difference. One thing that may be hard to show on camera is these holes are slightly bigger than these. Now the opening to these looks to be the same, but these are also tapered down so that your pencil leg kind of finds center. I think that's going to really matter if you're wanting precision and accuracy. You'll go with the Woodpeckers version here. If you're not doing that and you just want a T-square, this may be a good option for you. It's not bad for the price. Now the T-square, there's a big price difference here too. Almost double the price for the Woodpecker brand. I paid $153.99. I've lost my mind for the Woodpeckers 12-inch T-square. Now you could get that a little cheaper on Woodpeckers, but shipping, etc., you figure that out. Now the Amazon brand was only $59.97. You are losing a few little minor features there that I actually preferred on the Woodpeckers. If budget's not a concern, then the Woodpeckers brand is the one I would go for, the one I like. I just prefer it over the other, but the other one's still super square, super nice. Next up is the Saddle T-square. One thing I love about the Saddle T is the fact that you can mark two sides of the board and have that line carry all the way over. The pre-drilled holes in a Saddle T-square also help you draw those parallel, or scribe, I say draw, y'all might say scribe. You draw those parallel lines on your work and you can get very precise with this if you so choose. Now the made in China version of the Saddle T looks like this. It's so close, y'all. Like, this is a direct ripoff, in my opinion. There's some slight differences in the two Saddle Ts, but even the way they've printed their logo and stuff on there is very, very similar. Now, what you will notice is this piece is thicker on the Woodpeckers, and this piece is a little thinner. That won't matter at all as far as marking and measuring go. They're both shaped exactly alike, in my opinion. Like, they look almost identical as far as side to side and how they look. Now, this one is slightly wider. The Amazon version is ever so slightly wider. The font is different. Again, on this font, it's a little bit more bold and less crisp to me. And one thing that stands out immediately, the measurements on the Amazon version is off. And the reason I know that is you can slightly see a difference there. See how it's the Amazon version is slightly inset. This one is exactly correct, the Woodpeckers line. And it's that way on both sides. This side less so. You can see it's slightly less so, but it's still there. Now, one thing you may notice right here is where this really shines. If you're working with 3/4 stock, this Saddle T goes all the way to the bottom. This is 3/4 of an inch thick, where this is not. And so when you're marking, you see that line tail off. That's where try to make a mark down and it tails off because it won't go all the way to the bottom. The reason you're buying the Saddle T is for precision work, and you can see the holes are much, much finer than on the Amazon version. The Woodpeckers version, smaller holes, so you're gonna get thinner lines. And then of course also the 3/4 inch as we discussed. Now the Woodpecker Saddle T-Square is only $79.99, only $79.99. The one I bought from Amazon was $49.97, so only just a little bit of difference there. I would actually highly recommend going with the Woodpeckers brand here because of the minor differences. They will make a big difference down the road. Number 4 on the list is the mini square. These are handy as a shirt pocket, y'all. I'm telling you, if you get one of these in the shop, you'll always be looking in your shirt pocket for it, because this thing is really nice to have for just checking small pieces like small boxes, small drawers, ends of chisels, and tons of other little small square items. This is the way the Woodpeckers mini square comes. This is the way the Amazon version comes. Woodpeckers sent it in a nice little MDF holder, if you want to put that somewhere. Amazon version comes in bubble wrap. Straight out of the box, they look identical. They're also both square to each other, so I'm assuming they're both square. They're the same thicknesses, they're the same lengths, even the slots are the same. The chamfer around the slots look the same. Like, this thing looks identical to the Woodpeckers version, identical. There's some slight differences in the thicknesses of them using my caliper, but the very minor difference. Not a lot of price difference here either. I paid $47.99 for the tiny square from Woodpeckers from Amazon, and the Amazon version is only $11.99, and there's almost no difference. So if you want a tiny square, $11.99 is the one I would actually recommend. Again, USA, China made, up to you. Number 5 on the list is the mini carpenter square, also known as the delve square. Again, handy as a shirt pocket to have in the shop. I love this little square. One of my favorites, one I reach for all the time at this workbench. Now this is not an exact knockoff, obviously, but it is very similar to another square I have, which I'll show just a minute. They did paint it red. They even included a pencil with extra leads, a pen, and a nice little foam holder if you wanted to drop that in a toolbox to keep everything sorted. Now the delve square versus the Amazon version, small square they call it, you'll see some similarities and quite a bit of differences. These holes back here are different, obviously, and then also some different markings, different hole patterns, etc. So these aren't an exact replica, but it is basically the same square with different features. The delve square is one of those that's often duplicated, but never exactly replicated.
Never duplicated.
It has some unique features that other squares just don't have. First and foremost, that hole right there is self-centering on 3/4 inch stock, especially like cabinet frames, things like that. You can use a self-centering drill bit there. It's going to drill exactly in the center of your frame. So I brought my DFM square in because I thought these were the exact same thing. They are not. The DFM square is extremely handy. I love this square. On the face, they look identical. They are very similar. But when you turn it over, you notice that the blade is centered on the DFM square. It's offset on the version from Amazon. So that offset makes it just like the delve square. This is the Amazon version. That offset, the offset on one side lets you mark center of a 3/4 inch piece perfectly every time. Same thing with the Woodpecker's delve square. The shorter offset allows you to lay out mortise and tenon on 3/4 inch stock. The delve square, the same thing. Then they both have those holes for parallel scribe lines. Where these two differ from the delve square is the fact that they have those pre-drilled holes at those degrees. So if you needed to, say, lay out a 60-degree angle, you drop that included pin in there, and then all you have to do is slide that up and down, and you've got 60 degrees. You can do 45, but obviously the 45 is there as well. And then you've got 30, 22.5, however you need to lay those out. These are good for octagons and hexagons, things like that. You'll notice that the blades are the same thickness on these two. These two are very similar to each other, or similar to the DFM version if you don't mind the offset blade. You'll also notice that the delve square and the Amazon version are exactly square to each other, so there's no issues there. The delve square is $94.99, and the Amazon version is only $34.99. And the DFM version is only $44 and change, so I would actually steer you toward the DFM version if you're inclined for a small square and you don't need the offset blade for the mortise and tenon layout or the center finder on 3/4 inch stock. If not, then it's going to come down to the USA versus China made again on the delve square versus the Amazon version. This is the router I wish I'd have bought first, and this is the router I think most people should buy when starting woodworking, or if you only have a trim router. Let me explain. Before buying this, all I had was this rigid cordless router, and while it's great for what it's meant for, edge profiles mainly, it's not great for other things. Starting out in woodworking, you need a good router to start doing stuff like dados and plunge cuts and just all sorts of things that
the router brings to the table. And the reason I say this one is the one you should get, let me show you. This comes with a fixed base and a plunge base for about $200, give or take. Either case, it's really, really worth that price. I'll talk about the fixed base first, and then we'll talk about the plunge base. This fixed base, you have an adjustment ring here, so you can actually adjust the height of your router bit, obviously, with a fixed base on there. But this ring here gives you some micro control over how much you can raise and lower, and it just lets you dial it in precise to the precise depth. Also like that it has two handles on each side. That's going to give you a good grip and a good control over this router. And being a fixed base, it's a lower center of gravity with the fixed base because your hands are right next to your workpiece. You can really control this thing precisely. So you can actually mount this in a router table, leave it, and use the plunge base separately if you so chose. And the power cord just attaches and detaches extremely easily, and you can lock it in place and it's not going to come off. This lever here unlocks it, so you can remove it from the fixed base itself. Extremely easy, as you just saw. It slides into the plunge base extremely easily, and then it also has this lever, lock it in place. The plunge base also has two handles. These are rubber gripped handles, so you can actually get a really good grip when you're plunging. I like that. I also like that the on-off switch is right there in thumb's reach, and then you can also be able to turn that on and off extremely easy. It's also a variable speed, which means you can actually lower the speed and raise the speed, which is very important because this router has 1/2 and 1/4 inch collets that come with it. And what that means is you can use a 1/2 inch bit and you can slow that bit down so it doesn't burn your wood. It actually works a little better in some cases. On this side here, we have an adjustable depth stop, which is in 1/4 inch increments. And that's very important because if you just want to take small bites at a time, you can do that easily by just flipping this around, plunge it until it bottoms out, and then just keep doing that until you get to the depth you want. Also, one of the greatest things about this router is the fact that you can actually micro adjust this thing in 64th inch increments. That is huge because that's how I put this play button in there. Had I not had that depth stop setting to where I could micro adjust it, I wouldn't have been able to get this extremely and perfectly flat with the rest of the workbench while also never damaging the veneer on the plywood. That is a huge feat in my opinion, and one that actually shocked me that I was able to do that. A few other things about this router that I like, you can adjust this depth stop at any point that you want and get that perfect cut every single time. And the fact that you can lock this down, just simply push that lever when you get to depth and it'll stay at that depth. You don't have to worry about trying to hold it perfectly. Another feature that I absolutely love about this router is it's a soft start, meaning when I push this on button, it doesn't just jerk. If you'll listen, you'll hear it zzz, and then it comes to life, but that slow start keeps you from damaging things, and it's all around convenient. Now there's a bunch of different reasons why I should have bought this router first before buying this battery powered router. Now while having a trim router is extremely handy and useful in the shop for edge profiles and some really lightweight routing, if you're just going to buy one router or just starting out and getting one router, having something like this, because it has a plunge base and a fixed base, that's huge, and there's tons of uses for that. For one, I was able to cut out the center of this plywood using a plunge router with a cutting bit. Plunge down, take small bites so I didn't rip out or tear out the plywood, and I was able to make a perfectly square cut, and it was awesome. And then I was able to inset this play button in there. And then I was able to take that same plunge base with a flattening bit and able to go back and forth using a sled that I made to get this perfectly flat. You can't do that in any other way that I know of easily. One extremely important feature in a plunge router is if it plunges smoothly. You don't want it to stick or grab in any way, and I've used this a ton of times and it's still smooth as butter, just like it was the day it came out of the package. This router is 2¼ horsepower, meaning it has plenty of oof behind it to be able to cut things like dados and 3/4 inch plywood. I cut all of these out on this work table using that. I cut the dados for the T-track in the router table doing that, and I've used it in tons of other applications like cutting dovetails in a portable workbench. This thing at full depth, a 3/8 inch cut, is no problem for it. This has a 12 amp motor, which is what you should be looking for in a bigger router. It's just going to give you plenty of power for most tasks that you have. I would highly recommend getting the edge guide for your router. I've got one for the palm router also. I use it so much that it's almost a necessity to me. And for only $30-ish, I think is what this costs, it's well worth every dollar you have to buy for it. It just makes cutting away from the edge a certain distance extremely easy and convenient, and it speeds your process up a lot. The way the edge guide works, it attaches extremely easy. It slides into the pre-cut holes on either the plunge base or the fixed base has the pre-cut holes in it. Right there. You just slide it in till you get about where you want it to cut, and then you tighten these thumb screws down right here. On the back side, you see these screws will let you adjust it back here as well. And then there's this fine adjustment knob that you can turn, and it'll adjust it just a little bit so you can dial in that perfect cut. This variable speed router goes from 8,000 to 24,000 RPM, so it gives you plenty of range of speeds for every router bit you're going to use with this. Another feature that a lot of people don't know about actually is this little cap comes off. And you can actually hook a dust hose up there, and that's actually the dust collection. If you look down in there, and there's actually a little port. It's extremely hard to see on video, but that port goes up in through there, and that's where the dust is collected. If you put a hose there, hoses up out of your way, pulls that dust from inside this router base. I like that this ring is on there. That allows me to adjust the height of this fixed base. Then you can use something like these setup blocks here to get your exact depth. Once I have my depth, then I can just lock it in with that switch, and then now I know that I've got 3/8 of an inch. This isn't going anywhere. It doesn't matter unless you drop it. Just normal use, you're not going to affect that depth. And this ring just allows that micro adjustment, so you can really dial that in. Time to swap the bits. DeWalt's made it easy. There's just a button here on the side, so you can just use one wrench to be able to unloosen. I was told unloosen means tightened on another video. To loosen that nut off so that you can get this collet out. If I decided I wanted to put a 1/2 inch collet in there, it comes with one of those. And then I can use 1/2 inch bits inside the 1/2 inch collet, but I also have the option of the 1/4 inch bits because not all bits come in 1/2 inch sizes. I made a video a while back comparing this cordless router to a corded router about in equal strength as this, and I was actually pretty surprised that the outcome that come from that. You can go watch that. I'll put a link in the description and at the end of this video. This is okay for edge profile I talked about before. I tried to cut dados with this several times, and every single time I kept having to restart it. It's just not made for that. You can't do things like that easily. That's why the plunge router is such a versatile tool that I think every woodworker should have in the shop, and this should be your first router you buy and not the trim router. This will change the way you see budget track saws forever. What's great about this design, it's a universal base plate, or as universal as you can get in track saws. It will work on Milwaukee tracks, Wind tracks, Festool tracks, Makita tracks, and PowerTech tracks. This thing is well made. I like this housing. It feels really nice. It's as well built as most any saw I've found, and it's not overly heavy. It's not bulky, etc. It has a nice feel to it as far as the plunging. The first thing I noticed out of the pack, I didn't realize this when I bought it, but it doesn't have a riving knife. And this is kind of odd that a modern track saw doesn't have riving knives. The KREG does, the Grizzly does, so multiples of them have it, but this does have anti-kickback. And that's a positive in the replacement of the riving knife. All right, first power up. I always like to do this before we start cutting, just to kind of get the sound of the motor and see how loud it is, see if you can tell how powerful it is, if it has a soft start, etc. It is a very soft start. I don't know that I've ever seen one start that slow and get spun up to speed, but the drawback is, did you see how long it took to power down? After I let go of it, we're talking like a bandsaw. Like when you turn the bandsaw off, it just rolls and rolls and rolls for like a minute. That's what that felt like. The first cut is on a piece of 3/4 inch sanded birch. It's not Baltic birch, this is sanded plywood like you could buy at your regular home store. Just a standard 3/4 inch piece of plywood. It cut smooth as butter. I didn't notice any power issues. I did notice it does lack good dust collection a little bit. Not the worst I've seen, but also not the best I've seen. Not bad at this price point, honestly. But as far as the cut goes, with the supplied blade, smooth as butter. There is literally no tear out on either side, which is what you want on a track saw. So it did good. I do wish the dust collection was slightly better. but I'm not mad at how it performed on this piece of plywood. Cutting through this nearly 2-inch thick, it's actually 1 7/8 inches, so right at 2 inches thick. It cut through no problem at all. It powered through there. Of course, this doesn't have the same power as, say, the Milwaukee or the Festool, but I didn't notice that it had any trouble getting through there. You just have to take it a little slower. And this is a finer tooth blade meant for plywood. So the fact that I could cut through that without much trouble at all, I like it a lot. Now let's see how square it is, because I don't know, I have a suspicion. Using my handy dandy Woodpecker square, I trust that square. Whoa-wee, that is, I think, all the way down. What we got? Perfectly square. That's impressive. That is very impressive. It does suffer a little bit from dust collection woes, not the greatest, but square cut, you can't ask for nothing better there. You're not getting any deflection there. I like it. I like it.
I like it a lot.
I love the fact that this is a square cutting saw. This was dead on. I was shocked. I do like the fact that this is a 12 amp saw. It has plenty of power to power through some of that thicker hardwood like that. And I love the fact that it has anti-kickback. For the price point, I don't know that you can go wrong. I'll tell you right now, this is my pick for the best budget track saw under $500. I'm blown away by it. I really am. I think this is a fantastic saw at this price point for accuracy, for power, and all around just good features on a track saw. This will change the way you use your table saw for years. It's gonna add a lot of safety and convenience for you, and it'll attach to most any table saw, including job site saws, compact table saws, cabinet saws, band saws. You're gonna be able to use this in a variety of ways. Let me show you everything it can do. It will give you in-feed and out-feed support, which is huge on a compact table saw, especially if you're in a garage or small shop by yourself or on the work site by yourself. You don't want those boards falling off the back. Dangerous reaching over trying to grab those. This is going to help solve that because of this outfeed support. Now this fence is made out of extruded aluminum. It's solid as a rock. When you mount it to your fence, it's only going to add 1 inch of thickness. All you have to do is attach this to your fence. It's literally that easy with 2 clamps. Now the great thing about these is you can position this anywhere you want along the fence. So if you want a more in-feed style, you just move the fence towards you. If you want more outfeed, then you just move the fence away from you, put those supports on there, and that's gonna give you that outfeed or in-feed support. When you use this on the table saw, you're getting 3 main things in my opinion. Number 1, the in-feed, outfeed support. I think that's why most people are gonna use this, because you're gonna be able to prevent those boards from falling off or give you a little extra support when you're cutting those long boards by yourself. Number 2, the vertical feather boards. You can place these before and after the blade. Not the horizontal, but the vertical. That's gonna help keep that board from falling off as well. When you make all the way through the cut, it's also gonna keep that board pressed down toward the table, make your cuts more accurate and safe. Number 3, this gives you a high fence. If you don't know, if you're trying to make like raised panels or cut grooves in the end of boards, this high fence is a must-have for safety. It's gonna keep that board perfectly 90 degrees, got more surface area to hold that board against. I've got quite a bit of distance here on the back and the front, and I can move this if I needed to get extra support. So if I'm cutting really long boards or plywood or something, and I wanted to get that extra long support, now I've got about 26 inches of extra support on the back side of the blade where I need it most when I'm working by myself. Be cautious about tightening this down too much on your aluminum fence. If you have something like the saw stop fence or one of those T-glide fences, you'll probably not have any issues, but this is aluminum, so you don't want to over tighten it. It's not going to take much. You're just going to snug that up, and then this will be plenty secure for anything that you're going to be doing with it. Another thing I was worried about was if this would remain square like my other fence, and it does. There's no issues there. It is square all the way down without any issues at all. Because I've got feather boards on here, because I've got outfeed support in a couple of different places with this 46 inch, that piece is not gonna fall off of there. If it was really wide, it would probably, or wider, it would probably fall off of there. But for smaller stock, it's gonna support it really well, especially on the cut piece. You don't have to worry about trying to reach over that blade and catch those pieces falling. The outfeed pieces will catch that. I got a big old thick piece of walnut. It's about 2 inches, a little shy of 2 inches thick. It's really heavy, but I want to show you how well this supports. Same principle applies. Pushing all the way through, it still gives it plenty of support on the back. It supports it after the cut or behind the blade just fine. I think that was a good idea of them to put that support option on there. Now, if you have a bandsaw, you will absolutely love having one of these for your bandsaw. It's going to do a few things as well. Number 1, you still get those vertical feather boards, so if you're cutting longer, thinner stock, keeps that pressure vertically down.
You can pair this with some horizontal feather boards or the horizontal blade that the Bow Products has that keeps it pressed against the fence. When you're resawing boards, this thing shines for resawing. Gives you that high fence, so when you're resawing those wide boards, a lot of support there, as well as that horizontal pressure, so you get those accurate resaws. This thing shines there. And what's great about this is it is a modular system. What that means is you can buy the fence separately from all of these pieces. So if you already have some like these feather boards, there's no need to rebuy those. If you have like the micro jig clamps, no need to rebuy those or get charged for those. So you can buy the fence, the feather boards, the outfeed, whatever you need. You can literally purchase, say, the 24-inch fence for your bandsaw, the 46 or 36 for your table saw, and use the same attachments on both of them. I like that. I'm highly impressed with this Bow fence system. It's very nice. In no particular order, but first on the list, this is the Infinity router bit vise. If you don't have one of these, this is one of those tools you'll be absolutely glad you've got it when you need it. I love this little tool, and it's only about $35. The last time I showed this, it sold out rather quickly. What I love about this tool is the fact that you can take any router bit, quarter, 8mm, or half-inch shank, stick in there on the loosened side, and you'll be able to change out your bearings. In other words, it will not go to the left when you go lefty-loosey, and it will not allow the bit to rotate to the right when you go righty-tighty. That's one of the great things about this. Super easy to change out bearings without having to use some other tool like a pair of pliers to hold your router bits. You don't want to mar that shank. Some people suggest you can leave them in the router to do this, but you still have to push the button to lock the thing. It's just easier to use this than trying to leave it in the router to change them out, and I like having this in the shop. Anytime I get ready to change out a bearing, I'm glad I've got this. Next on the list are a few different tools. We'll go ABC here. A, the DeWalt Atomic brand drill and driver set. If you don't know, DeWalt has a few different lines of their cordless tools. You got regular, everyday DeWalt cordless tools, and then you have the Atomic line, then you have the XR. I think the Atomic line is the best for most people, and I purchased these on Amazon because I got a really good deal on them, which you typically do on Amazon. These are fantastic. I find myself reaching and grabbing these for projects, for use around the house. They're just lightweight, and the batteries last a long time. I'm just rocking the 1.5 amp hour batteries. I do have some 5 amp hour batteries as well. They have plenty of power for the shop, and they just work well. And they're super comfortable to hold. They're not overly heavy. Just fantastic set of drills and impact. Now B is the router. This is the XR line router. I don't think they have a lower router, but this is a fantastic router. I even built a whole mini router table around this thing. It is fantastic. I love this little router. I have several routers in the shop. The DeWalt is one of my favorites, probably between the Milwaukee and the DeWalt, but the DeWalt line is fantastic, especially for this. Plenty of power, plenty of battery life. Love having this in the shop. Now C is a recent addition, is the DeWalt Track Saw. This is a 60 volt track saw, so it's not in the 20 volt line. You can't use a 20 volt battery in here. I don't know why, but the 60 volt battery will work on these others. Doesn't make sense. This is a really good track saw with a few little quirks. It's probably the weirdest track saw or the weirdest tool DeWalt makes. However, that doesn't make it bad because I'm weird too. So I have actually enjoyed having this in the shop so far, along with the other ones. I have a whole video review on this saw already you can go check out. This bad boy got some power. But it is a very powerful saw that works really well with a few little quirks. It's weird, I'm weird. It's okay. Go check the video out if you're interested in the track saw. But overall, the DeWalt cordless line on Amazon has been some of my favorite tools I've purchased. Next up, one of my favorite things I purchased on Amazon in 2023 was this Paolini pocket rule set. I purchased the entire set myself. Woodpeckers has never given me a tool or sponsored a video. I'm just very impressed with their quality. Mainly because any woodpecker tool, no matter if it's a ruler or a square, you can line them up and all their measurements match each other exactly. They're extremely accurate, and that's what I appreciate about them, and they're made in the USA, so who can beat that? This is the set. You get the 7, 9, and 13 inches, how long they actually are. I think they list them a little different, maybe 6, 8, and 12, but they're actually a little longer than that. You shouldn't do that with yours. But these are fantastic because of the slide rule or stop. You'll be able to do repeatable measurements, set depths of aprons, legs, all kinds of stuff with that. I also like the end scale they have on there. You can set up bit heights, things like that with it. It's very handy. They'll set up by themselves using that slide rule inserted into the hole, and they're just high quality tools that you will not regret buying. Now, truthfully, I mostly use this smaller one, but I do appreciate and like having all of the options here in the shop because from time to time, I want the longer rulers. You gotta check these out if you're into high quality woodworking tools and you don't mind spending a little bit more for that quality. Now, this might not be a tool you were expecting in this video, but if you make videos for your customers or you're posting on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Good audio in your videos will level up your game and get you more reach because it's better quality. And people will watch a video with more quality audio before they'll watch a video with less video quality, if that makes sense. Now, these are some of the best mics I've ever bought, and it's thanks to my editor, Chris. Thank you, sir. He recommended these DJI mics. They're wireless. That's huge in video production, and they're easy to set up. They're literally plug and play. They'll work in your phone. They'll work on a standard camera, and they have a little touch screen on there to tweak the settings to your audio liking. I paired mine with this Shure lavalier mic so that I get this mic up here. But if you don't want that, they clip onto your shirt. They can clip onto your hat. They have a little magnet that clips through the shirt. These are fantastic. And they have charging case similar to like an AirPod, so you could travel with them, use them on the road, use them in the shop. The battery life lasts forever. These are fantastic if you're making content. One thing I love about these mics is the fact that you get 2 wireless mics per pack. So if you're doing interviews or if you just have 2 people on camera, they can each have their own mic. This is awesome to have. Listen, I've tried cheaper models than this. I've tried other brands than this. These are by far, of my 7 years of content making, the best I've ever used and easiest. I hate math, just so you know. I'm not good at it, I don't like it, but in woodworking you have to do math, and this is why I like this little Construction Master Pro. It's a fairly inexpensive calculator for what you're getting because it'll do fractions, inches, etc. And a lot of times when we're building projects, you have to input those fractions, add them up, just to get the correct dimensions so that your project comes out correct, especially when you're trying to fit a project into a space or just trying to add up all of your materials so that you know you got enough when you go to build the project. That's why I like this little jewel, and it's not that expensive. There's even a quick reference guide on the inside to help you out. It's easy to use, and that's why I like it. And if you're into roofing or you have to build stairs, there's options for that on there as well, for pitch, rise, run, etc., as well as the stairs. You can either do circles, arcs, it'll basically do it all. I know, we all mostly have smartphones in our pocket, and you can find some online calculator to help you do that, but it's much easier just to grab this in the shop, in my opinion, punch in a few measurements, and there we go. The tool I bought so you didn't have to. I did a whole video on this. You can just search 731 Recon M1. This thing goes on almost any miter saw, and it's a very, very accurate way to measure your parts. So if you're looking for precision, this is the way to go. I detailed that in that video, but it's super simple. You just clip it onto most any miter saw fence. You calibrate it right out of the box. Fairly simple to do. Just check out my video, and then off to the races you go. If you need to repeat parts down to the 32nd or even smaller, this might be your best option because you're not going to rely on tape measure error or anything like that. It's fully digital, works really, really well. Now, there's a couple of caveats you may want to check out in that video, but for a lot of people, this is a good option for a tool. Now, is it worth it for the price tag? That's really up to you. I think it's a good buy for certain situations, especially if you're looking for precision and accuracy, which are 2 different things. So I'll learn. Next, one of my favorite routers I've ever bought. I bought this year on Amazon. I already had one of these in the router table, but I bought this one to do a review versus the DeWalt. This is an excellent option for a router, especially for the price. For right around $200, you get the fixed and plunge base with this router and a hard case for storage or carry, and this thing is absolutely awesome. I love this router. It's one of my favorite routers that I've ever used, including the DeWalt, but as far as awesome goes, I really like how this, especially the plunge base, worked. I have a whole video comparing the two if you want to check those out. But this is an absolutely fantastic 2¼ horsepower router that will accept 1/4 and 1/2 inch collets. I don't think you could go wrong with this, and it's one of my favorites of 2023. Even though it's been out for a very long time, this is a tried and true proven router that'll last you for years. If you've watched this channel any time at all, you know I'm a huge fan of the Festool sander. This ETS 125 is by far one of my favorites. But if you're on a budget or you're not ready to step into a higher end sander, because this one's $250. This one is under $100, usually right around $80. This is the DeWalt sander. This sander won my best sander under $100 in that video because of the features, how well it sands, the least vibration, the dust collection. This is just a good all-around sander that's going to last you for a very long time. When I first started woodworking, I tried to cheap out and bought a hyper tough sander. It only lasted about a month or so, and then I went and spent $79 or $80 on this DeWalt sander, and it lasted for years and years and years. And then I replaced it with this one for that video so that I could have an all new sander so that it was a fair test. This is a good option for a sander if you're getting into woodworking or you just want to upgrade from maybe one of the more budget options. This is a good solid option for you, and is one of the best of 2023 from Amazon, in my opinion. Sanding is a chore that few of us like, and it's not often we get a new innovative product that threatens to disrupt the entire task of sanding and make it better. Today, I want to talk to you about the new 3M Random Orbit Sander. If you sand a lot, you may start looking at premium options like Festool, Mirka. Now I've got the 3M Random Orbit Sander in the shop. Wow. There's a difference, and we're going to talk about it. The first thing I noticed on the 3M sander the instant I turned it on was how quiet and how much less vibration there was. It was absolutely astounding. What's very interesting is the 3M stroke rate is 3/16 of an inch or 5 millimeters, if you like that sort of thing. So is the Festool Rotex. So you have the same sanding stroke on the Rotex as you do on the smaller, lighter, and much easier to use 3M. The Festool ETS 125 is a finished sander, much like the 3M finished sander. Now the sanding stroke on this is 2 millimeters on the ETS 125, so you're actually getting a more aggressive sanding stroke while still maintaining a fine finish with the 3M. What's been interesting to me about using the 3M for a few weeks now is how comfortable it really is to use. I think because of the way your hand and arm naturally lay on top of this sander, it makes it much better to sand with as far as fatiguing. I haven't noticed any hand fatigue or arm fatigue while sanding for long periods of time. It just works extremely well. I've been really shocked by the dust collection on the 3M. It has worked extremely well. It has the bigger holes like you see on most other sanders, but it has a bunch of these tiny little holes. The holes on the pad of the sander provide two very important functions. Number one, dust extraction. This thing pulls in a majority, 95, 99%, I don't have the exact percentage, it's a bunch. It pulls in the majority, almost all of the dust that you're creating, which is very fine and very harmful dust to your lungs, which is great. The number two purpose these holes provide is to keep this tool and your sandpaper cool. Keeping the sandpaper cooler will help it last longer, and then keeping the tool cooler is going to keep your hand much more comfortable. Another thing that surprised me with this sander is how fast it works. It is Rotex level fast. Another thing you can use this sander for is basically turn it upside down, inverted, and use it as a sander just like that, so you can sand small parts with it. I've done this a few times already in the shop, especially on trying to sand over a radius or very small parts like this. It works extremely well for that. And I like that the paddle, just when you lay it on its back, it turns it on. It's really cool. When I took it out of the box, I was like, man, this is pretty nice. And then when I turned it on, I was literally astounded at how quiet and how much less vibration it had than any other sander I'd ever used. I was pretty shocked. And I'm still impressed every time I hit that paddle switch. It's just so quiet. Now, would I recommend you buy this over any of the other sanders I've talked about today? That depends on A, your budget, and how much you sand. If you're sanding very little throughout the month, probably not. You're probably gonna be just fine using one of these DeWalt's or whatever brand you're most comfortable buying. If you use the sander a lot, you're gonna see a significant difference in this versus this. We're talking night and 3 days later difference. It's a huge, huge difference. The new Masca Dial Jig X. Wait till you see what this can do. If you're just wanting to put two boards together like this, basically two butt joints together, the Dial Jig X is going to be perfect for that if you don't want to use screws and you just want a nice strong joint. Now all you have to do is take your drill bit with the included depth stop and then set the depth that you want. And this is a 5/16 inch drill bit, so you're going to be using 5/16 inch dowels. Once you have the depth set, all you have to do is drill the two holes. So what this is going to do is put dowels at opposing directions. It's going to lock that board in without even having to glue. I would use glue, but you can actually get away with not using glue with this method because it's going to lock it in. Let me show you. Now without glue, you're not going to pull this apart because of the way those things are crossed in there. We'll do a cross section on the bandsaw. I'll cut that off and let you see how they lock in there. You're not going to pull that apart. Now where you would want to use glue is because if it flexes this away, then you can start seeing that gap open up. So that's why you would want to glue that if there's going to be any pressures or twisting, anything like that on your piece. I would actually always recommend gluing, but if you didn't want to, then for whatever reason, this would lock it in. So that's what the cross section of the Dial Jig X looks like. You can see how it's locking that board in there. Now if you glued all that and we cut that away, you would see basically the same thing, but the dowels would still be there. Super solid, super strong joint. A couple of really good practical ways to use the Dial Jig X is to build furniture with it. I think like joints like this, you could use the Dial Jig X to go through and shored both of those up, all of these joints on the top and the bottom, using this Dowel Jig X. When I built this old shop stool out of pocket holes. It's pretty simple, but the dowel would give it a unique look. So if you were building bar stools, stuff like that, and you didn't want those pocket holes exposed and you wanted a very inexpensive doweling jig, this may be the way to go. I think another interesting use case for this Dowel Jig X would be building drawers. Instead of using pocket holes or just glue, you could actually use this to add a little accent to the side of your drawers, kind of dovetail-esque, you know, just have those nice contrasting colors on the edge of drawers. I think that's a really cool use for it. I think that would make a very strong and nice looking drawer. You could also use this to repair drawers. You know, sometimes those drawer faces are actually built into the sides, and if they come off, this could be a good repair tool as well. This is a solid block of aluminum, and it does have those hardened steel drill guides, so you're not going to wear this thing out. You're not going to worry about dropping it and breaking it. I mean, it's just a piece of aluminum, so it's going to be solid. What's extremely interesting to me is that this is like no other dowel jig. Most all other dowel jigs are 90 degrees into the piece that they're drilling into. The dowels are 90 degrees in there. These are at a very sharp angle both ways. You can see here how it's kind of opposite each other. It just makes sense. It's going to lock in there. I've also been thinking about this Dowel Jig X being used to create splines in 45-degree pieces. I think it would work. Maybe if you could find a way to clamp that on there. It's just very interesting to have a new tool like this to come along and figure out interesting ways to use it. I can't wait to see what you make with your Dowel Jig X. Be sure to tag me on Instagram at 731 Woodworks. Next on the list, you just saw me use it actually, it's the Suzanne Flush Cut Trim Saw. I love this little saw because it's under $30 and it cuts both hardwood and softwoods, and if you ever get confused, it's labeled which teeth are supposed to cut which type wood. A more coarse tooth for the hardwoods, a finer tooth for the softwoods, super, super sharp, a very, very flexible blade on it, and it just slices right through those dowels, and that's exactly what it's made for. You can also use it to cut small pieces of wood, things like that. It's kind of a fine detail saw, but for the most part, I'm using it to trim my dowels off flush, and it doesn't leave a bunch of marring and cuts and things like that on your product. So it's just a really good high quality saw. Suzanne makes some very good, very high quality saws. As a matter of fact, this one I think is maybe over 30, it may be under 30, but it's a foldable dovetail saw. It is made by Suzanne. It's probably one of my favorite bigger saws, hand saws that I have, but for the dowels, that Suzanne is just right. I'll go ahead and link to both of these in the description if you're interested, but I would highly recommend the smaller, and this one's awesome too. And I probably pronounced Suzanne wrong, but I'm a redneck, so. Next on the list are organization trays. These things are absolutely awesome and they're very inexpensive. You get a pack of 32 of these from small, medium, and large, under 30 bucks, and I use them in a variety of ways. My resolution for 2022 was to get organized, and I've used some of these as well as some other products like the tool wall, the tool cart, as well as this thing behind me to be able to actually organize the shop. These little organizers are just under 2 inches deep and they can hold a variety of stuff. You see here I'm able to organize screwdrivers, my wrenches, random sockets, all of my CNC stuff, even a variety of drill bits that don't have a home are able to be put in these little containers, and they lock together so you can organize them in your drawer any way you want, and when you open the drawer they don't just slide and move all over. I really like that feature on them. When you open the drawer, you can actually find what you're looking for and don't spend 10 minutes looking for that lost wrench or whatever you're after. So if you want to get organized, especially in your shop drawers, I highly recommend these. They're really awesome. Next on the list, by far my favorite tape measure I've ever owned, so much so that I thought 4, but I can't find one, but such is the case in the wood shop. That's why I have 3 of these in the shop, and I swear I have 4 somewhere. These are the Fast Cap Old Standby. I like the 16 foot, but they also make them in 25 foot. These are really awesome because they have some really cool features that I really like in a tape measure. First and foremost, they're very durable. They have a padded, almost not really padded, but it's kind of a rubberized outside, but it doesn't squish, so it's a little more firmer rubber. But even if you drop it, these things are extremely durable. I drop them all the time. And speaking of dropping, right here on the front, I like how the blade is recessed inside there, so if you do drop them, they're less likely to bend that blade, causing inaccuracy. I also really like the clip. It has a nice spring-loaded clip, so it hangs on your belt or your pocket extremely easy. It's not so tight that you can't easily take it out. The markings are extremely easy to read on here, and it has a pencil sharpener built in. How cool is that? So you never have a dull pencil so long as you have one of these close by. And last but not least, you can customize them. I have my own Outlaw Board Butter sticker on mine, The little 2-inch stickers fit perfect right there. Just a nice added bonus. If you'd like one of your own Outlaws Board Butter stickers to go on your new fast cap, link in the description. I like to scatter them all over the shop so I don't have to go looking for one when I need it. Nobody knew about this saw. Not me, maybe not you. Now you can use this as a standard circular saw or on the track. One important thing to note on this track, it's two-sided. In other words, the saw can go either direction. However, one side is longer or wider than the other. One side is about 2.5 inches long to the outside edge of the splinter guard, and then the other side is just 2 inches, a 1/2 inch difference. But what that's for is the long side is for 90-degree cuts, the shorter side is for bevel cuts up to 45 degrees. Overall, I like the fit and feel of this saw. I like how the angle adjustment works. It does have a kind of a unique feature. It has a stop at 45 degrees. That will flip out and let you go all the way to 56 degrees. The depth adjustment works very easy. Flip a switch, move it, push it back down. I like that. It works much like my rigid circular saw. Now this isn't just a circular saw. This was absolutely built to be a track saw. And the reason I know that is it has the track saw adjustment knobs on the front and the back, as well as what I'm thinking is going to be an anti-tip or anti-kickback. All right, so now I'm gonna cut this piece of plywood. First cut with this saw minus the splinter guard. This thing, it's nice. For cutting plywood, I don't think you'll have any issues at all with this. With this new blade, it did cut the plywood really well. Like I didn't see a whole lot of tear out. There's a little bit under the bottom side again, but I think that's from the framing blade. You'll want to pick up another one. Dust collection on this is abysmal, which I knew it would be. It's got a giant open face here. This is not like a plunge track saw that has the covered shroud. It just didn't. I even held my hose right there on the dust collector. It's not meant for dust collection. Next up, I cut this big old thick piece of walnut. Plenty of power. It powered right through it. I didn't feel it bogging too much. You do hear a little bog on the motor, but it did work well. And most importantly, it cut absolutely square, dead on, all the way down the cut. That's what I was surprised by. I thought maybe it might deviate a little bit. None. It was perfectly square, and that was impressive. This is made for someone who, A, doesn't have a lot of space, 2, the person who's breaking down plywood fairly regularly, and you still want that space savings. You don't want a giant track taking up a lot of space, and you can break this down pretty easily. And it gives you the 55 inches here, so you're gonna be able to make those 4-foot cuts, cut across sheets of plywood. It's perfect for the garage shop woodworker. And 3, somebody who is already in the skill line or don't have a battery platform yet, or just wants a good, affordable track saw that could also double as a circular saw that you could use around your house. Overall, I'm kind of impressed with the Skil cordless line. This is my first Skil cordless tool. I have some more coming just to check them out. I've been hearing a lot of good stuff about the 20-volt power core from Skil. I think they're doing a good job. I think this is a viable option if you're in the market for affordable cordless power tools. I like this saw. I don't love it, but I do like it, and I think they've come a long way and done something that I haven't seen anybody else doing, is basically making a circular saw on purpose a track saw. So I like that fact that they tried that, and I like this saw pretty good. I picked this planer for mainly because of the price and because of the quality and the reviews that I was reading on. This is a 2-blade planer, which is a trade-off you get when buying this model or this price point of a planer. Usually anything with 3 blades or more, or 3 blades or the helix head or spiral heads will cost significantly more. So the first thing I did was start planing a piece of spruce, AKA pine. It's really soft wood. I wanted to make sure, because that's going to tell me if it's going to snipe or not. And the first time I went through, it did have snipe on it, pretty good bit of snipe. I wasn't too concerned because I knew we could adjust those tables, and that's what I just did. You see me here, I'm just tightening or loosening those bolts off to raise that table up. And basically it's kicked up about an 1/8 inch higher on the back side here than the actual bed is. That basically raises that board up, and as it goes through, the rollers pull it back flat. And that's how I have my DeWalt set up as well. And it works extremely well. It took me just a little bit to get it all lined out, but after a few passes, I was able to get that snipe almost gone, and that's pretty much what I expected with this machine. You're gonna have a little bit. It's gonna be extremely difficult to totally eliminate it without building another bed in there or a false bed. But for what we're doing here, I can sand that off and you'll never know it was there. So once I got the snipe caught and found and figured out, I just started running this through the planer. I run it through multiple times. I got this down pretty thin. This is probably a 1/4 inch thin. So I planed off at least a 1/2 inch, taking little bites at a time. That's key. You also may see me angle it just a little bit. If the board is narrow enough, I do like to send it through at an angle. That helps with a couple of things, tear out as well as snipe. Once I got it dialed in on the cheap spruce, then I started running this piece of maple through. and it did extremely well. The finish on the maple is almost butter smooth. We're talking probably 120 grit, maybe finer. If you sanded it, that's how it would feel. It does have a tiny bit of tear out. Maple's notorious for that on a planer, even the DW735. Next up was this hunk of walnut. This is 8/4, 2 inches thick, and it's just a solid piece of walnut that I had. I ran this through several times, and it has virtually no snipe. There's a tiny, you can feel barely a little bump right there on the end, and on the in feed and out feed. It's so minor that you could take 120 grit and that would be gone within a couple of seconds. Then finally, I wanted to see how an epoxy board would work, because epoxy is notorious for clogging up planers and jointers. So I run this through several times on both sides and had no issue. I actually took the dust cover off the back just to see if there was any collected in there, and there was none. So that's actually quite promising for this planer. If you're a beginner on a budget, I would highly recommend picking up this planer. I like it. It performed better than I thought, especially if you're wanting to get all your boards the same thickness, cut down on sanding, or mill rough lumber so you can save some money when you're buying lumber. Now, if you have the budget, I would recommend the DW735X, because I've had this thing for almost 5 years now, and it's given me zero trouble. It has been a workhorse. It's a really good planer. It's going to last you a very long time. If you are on a budget, this is a great option. What's great about this planer is it takes up very little space. These wings fold up to be out of your way. It's just a very compact design, fits perfectly on my new planer cart. As you see here, it's just a good all-around machine for $300 to $400, depending on what sale you catch it on. This is an excellent machine. The right drill bit can make or break a woodworking project. First on the list are multi-use twist bits or angle bits. A lot of different names for them, but they come in packages like this. Or a lot of us still have these metal boxes around that I know my dad and grandpa both had sets of these. They must have sold them really cheap at Sears and Roebuck or wherever they bought them at, but a lot of us have these metal boxes like this. These type drill bits have their place in woodworking on some level. We use them for a multitude of reasons. A lot of mine uses are for pilot holes, so that I can just drill a quick pilot hole at the end of a board to prevent that splitting if you're driving screws in there. Now the ends of these bits are just angled, and so when you try to drill a hole or pinpoint a specific spot, sometimes these bits have a tendency to walk around. It's always good to use a center punch or a spring-loaded punch like I have here to set the mark where you want to start the drill. That'll help that bit stay in that spot while you drill. You can see here when I use the center punch, it come out almost perfectly in the center of those two lines, whereas when I use the non-center punch, it had a tendency to walk around a little bit, and then I was able to drill the hole, but it is off the mark. These do have a tendency to tear out a little bit on the backside, especially on the bigger size bits. That's one of the drawbacks of those angle bits like that, but again, they do have their place in the woodworking shop, and everybody should have a set. I recommend this DeWalt set. You get all the way from 1/16 all the way up to 1/2 inch. And you also get 3 extras of some of those smaller sizes, because those tend to break when you hold the drill wrong, drilling pilot holes, things like that. So that's a nice add-on, especially in this nice little case that keeps them organized, so long as you put them back. Next on the list are brad point bits. These are some essential bits in the shop. They have a couple of unique features that no other bit has. I picked up this set of Owl Tools brad point drill bit set. It's a 12-pack. It's a really good value for all the size bits you get. Brad point bits have 2 unique features. One is the point, the brad point, kind of like a brad nail, right? What that allows you to do is pinpoint with accuracy, hitting the exact spot where you want to drill, and that bit actually, or the point actually sticks in there. And when you drill that hole, you don't have to worry about it walking on you like the angle point bits do. You'll also notice on the brad point bit, the shoulders here behind the tip slope back toward that tip slightly. And what that allows it to do is actually cut the wood as it's going through. It's also going to drill a smoother hole on the inside versus the angle point bit. Let me drill a hole with both and I'll show you. Brad point bits are excellent for drilling a specific spot, or just drilling like a small hole so you can put a dowel in, a cap over a screw head, something like that. Just a really good option to have in the shop. If you're interested in any of the drill bits I show today, there'll be links in the description below to each one. Third on the list is by far my favorite drill bit to use in the shop, and those are Forstner bits. A Forstner bit is basically a round or a bigger round bit than your standard bits. They have the brad point bit on there. They also have almost kind of like blades in the center that actually cut the wood, and you'll see the shavings actually coming off of the wood as you drill, giving you a clean edge as well as a flat bottom. Way back in 2017 when I built my dog kennel, I was looking for a drill bit that I could drill clean holes for those bars to sit in. That's when I discovered Forstner bits. I knew that I needed those, so I ordered one the right size for the rebar to go in. and from then I was hooked. I went on to use them in my stove covers where I drilled 2 holes and then connected them with a jigsaw to create a handle. You can also use Forstner bits to drill angled holes where it's very hard to do that with other type bits. And you could also drill at the edge of boards as well as connecting them together to make oblong holes or to just to hog out material for your mortises. I have this nice set of Irwin Forstner bits that I bought about $50-ish or so. It's a pretty good set. I do see that they start to dull after several uses, especially if they start heating up. But they are a very good option for beginners or those on a budget. I've recently invested in a set of Fish Wave Forstner bits. Now these are very expensive compared to the Irwin bits, but you're getting what you paid for, in my opinion. Now, these Fish Wave bits, on the outer rim of them, you'll see this kind of a wavy serrated design. That really makes a very smooth cut, where you'll see the Irwin brand has the kind of a sawtooth design, which more tears through the wood. It's still cutting it, but it's cutting it kind of like a saw blade, where the Fish Wave bits are almost slicing the wood fibers. What that wavy design does is create less friction, and less friction is going to create less heat buildup. And heat is the enemy of sharp blades. The lower the temperature you can keep your bits and blades, the longer they're going to stay sharp and the longer they're going to last you. Fish bits can also be resharpened up to 30 times, so that's kind of a long life bit for you. That's one of the reasons I love these fish bits. When you're using Forstner bits or any larger bit, the lower speed actually helps the bit out. The higher the speed, you're going to create more heat and just create more work for the bit. So just remember, the larger the bit, the lower the speed. On drill presses especially. On the fish side, you see that this is very smooth all the way around. On the inside, there's a tiny bit of fraying right there, nothing major, a little bit of sandpaper, that's gone. This side, there is a little bit of tear out all the way around the edge or in a couple of different places on the edge, and the inside is quite a bit rougher than on the fish side. So these, because of the design of this sawtooth design, it's cutting a little bit rougher, and the bottom is also rougher. So these fish bits cut much smoother than other types. One of the best ways to prevent tear out with a Forstner bit is to drill until the point of that bit goes through the other side, and then drill in from the other side like this. The tip just comes through. Switch sides. There you go. I'll say this, I've been woodworking for a long time, and I've used several different bits. If you have the budget, get the wave bits. They'll last you likely a lifetime or very close to it. If you're on a budget, get this Irwin set. These are really great bits for what you're getting for the price. I'll also say Freud bits have the wavy edge, and they're very good as well. Forstner bits and drill presses work beautifully together. They're almost made for each other, like Oreos and milk, peas and carrots, woodworkers and sawdust. They work together well. If you have a drill press, you want a good set of Forstner bits. This is a wind drill press. I've got a review on the channel way back a few years ago. This has served me well for a budget beginner drill press. I really recommend this one. Who likes peas and carrots anyway? Number 4 on the list are the Wood Owl Overdrive bits. Now these are very unique in a couple of different ways. They're basically a brad point bit, but they have these extremely long flutes on there to clear away that material much faster. Wood Owl claims that these will give you 35% more battery life using these bits versus other bits, because these were specifically designed for cordless drill. These are made from high carbon steel, and they will actually work in an impact driver. They have this standard 1/4 inch driver bit on one end, so you can use them in a drill or impact, which is very cool. The unique design of these has almost like the brad point and similar to a Forstner bit on the edges here, where it's actually cutting that wood instead of basically tearing it. What's impressive about these Wood Owl Overdrive bits is they actually do what they say. There's minimal tear out. Now you'll get some here and there, but nothing like you do with a Forstner bit, a regular drill bit, or brad point bits or anything like that. So if you want to get higher chances on a cleaner hole, if you have to go all the way through, the Wood Owl Overdrive bits are the way to go. You play around with the drill settings and the type of material you're drilling into, you'll get much better results once you figure out, does it work better on slower speeds or higher speeds depending on the bit size and material you're using. I've tested these against Forstner bits, I've tested these against regular drill bits, and these outperform both of those if you're drilling a through hole. I really like these Wood Owl bits. Number 5 are countersink bits, and I'm going to throw self-centering drill bits in this mix because they're both not the same, but in the same group, I think. Anyway, what do you think? Self-centering drill bits are made for centering in a hole, especially for hinges. If you try to take a drill bit and hit the exact center of the hole on a hinge, you're likely going to be off one way or the other, and that's going to throw your cabinets off when the screw pulls the hinge wrong. So these self-centering drill bits will center that hole perfectly, and then you can drive your screw home without worrying about it. Now, countersink bits are essential for woodworking. There's tons of different reasons why you want the head of that screw below the surface, and there's a couple of different styles. I picked up this Wood Owl set of countersink bits. I also picked up this Irwin set of countersink bits, and what these are for is if there's already a hole there, or you've drilled a hole and now you need to countersink that screw head. These are great for that, and these will work on metal as well, so a double purpose on these. Now the way the countersink bits work are they have the drill bit that drills the pilot hole, but they also have this extra bit up here that actually cuts basically a beveled edge around where the screw head can set in. There's also another countersink bit that has a stop on it that prevents you from plunging too far so that all of your countersink holes are very uniform. These work extremely well, except some versions or some models will mar the wood, so you have to kind of be careful about the ones you buy. I would steer clear of the very, very cheap ones and spend a little money and protect your project. Bonus drill bit that I think every woodworker should have in the shop are hole saw kits or a hole saw. You don't need them a lot, but sometimes you need those big holes drilled, specifically like when I was making my cornhole boards. I needed to have a big 6-inch hole there, so I went and ordered a 6-inch bit. Well, over time, I've noticed that here or there, I needed to drill a hole that was bigger than my Forstner bit. So I went ahead and picked up a set of Milwaukee hole saw. These aren't specifically needed by woodworkers, but they are extremely handy to have when you need them. So do you need them? A ridiculously expensive tool are dust extractors, but I think they are 100% worth the price. Now, I've had the pleasure of using both the 3M and the Festool dust extractors, and they're both really good at what they do. I didn't realize how much I would appreciate a dust extractor and why it's a little different than just a regular shop vac. I like dust extractors so much. I have one here at the workbench that I use for sanding, the domino, the track saw, the routers, whatever I'm gonna be using here at the workbench. And I have another one at the miter saw station because it works so well. Now, where the dust extractors made a huge difference in the shop is dust collection and the fine dust, the microscopic 1 micron dust, whatever you call it. Really, really tiny dust particles that get in the air, get in your lungs, that are super dangerous. I've seen much, much less fine dust all over the shop ever since I got this one almost 2 years ago now. This is by far one of the most recommended tools I could offer to tell you to go get if you don't have one yet, especially for the sander, because the sander's creating that really fine dust. But it also works well on bigger tools like my miter saw. I just love having them in the shop. But I am a Woodpeckers fan. I have Woodpeckers tools in the shop that I bought and never been sponsored by them. These may be the closest rivals I've ever seen at a fraction of the price. I'm impressed, y'all, because these are aluminum based, but they are a stainless steel blade, so you don't have to worry about corrosion. And they have a ton of features packed in. Now, this set comes with a 7-inch and a 4-inch, but you can buy them separately if you wish. Each one of these squares have holes in them at 1/8-inch increments so that you can draw parallel lines to the edge of your stock, which is great for layout. I also like how easily these are to read. They're a satin finish. Even though it's stainless steel, it's not too shiny, so it doesn't glare on you. And you just got those graduated marks all the way up the long side of that triangle, all the way from 0 to 90. That helps you lay out angles. I love the fact that they've thought of 2 ways to get measurements off of this as far as on a square goes. If you look, the scale starts at the top side of the base going up the scale, so when you lay that on the edge of the stock, you're measuring from the edge of the stock up. However, if you turn the square on its edge, the scale starts at 0 here, so you can use this edge to set up blade heights, bit heights, fence distances, anything like that. Notice that the blades are also offset from center, and what that's going to allow you to do is mark for center of a 3/4 inch stock or lay out mortise and tenon on 3/4 inch stock. As far as the scale accuracy on these squares, you're getting extremely accurate measurements. At 0.0015 of an inch, you're not going to notice any deviation there woodworking. And the squareness of each square is plus or minus 0.005 thousandths of an inch. You don't need any more accuracy than that. Building any common woodworking project, the wood's going to move more than that. Again, probably the closest competitor to Woodpecker's quality and accuracy that I've seen at a fraction of the cost. This is a set of eye gauging setup blocks that has a ton of setup blocks in there, so you can pretty much dial in anything you want. So this set goes from 1/16 of an inch all the way to 1/2 inch in these small blocks, and then of course you get the 1, 2, 3 block. If you look at the 1/4 inch block, it has the 1/4 inch printed there, which I really like because that allows you to know that that's 1/4 inch thick. Some of the wider ones will have the arrows pointing to let you know that this is the distance you're measuring, 7/16. This is 1/4, but they also have them printed on the face. And you can rest assured that these are extremely accurate as shown here with my digital caliper. All of these that I checked, dead on. Starting at the router table, this is going to let you set your bit heights and your fence distance. Also at the table saw, you're going to be able to set your saw blade depth exactly where you want it. or the fence distance, especially using the 1-2-3 setup block. A 1-2-3 setup block is almost a must-have in the shop because they are so useful. You can use them as a standard square. You can also set up blade heights and fence distances with these, and what I really like about the eye gauging one is there is a very accurate scale on two sides, the 3-inch side and the 2-inch side. That is a perfect way to set the depths and the bit heights of anything that you're going to be using in the shop. I love this feature on this eye gauging 1-2-3 block versus a standard like 23-hole 1-2-3 block. These things are absolutely perfectly square, so you don't have to worry about that. And you can use those again as a square to set up your fences or anything else. These do go from 1/16 inch all the way to 1/2 inch, and you can combine those in any orientation you want to get the depth you need. They also come in this very nice plastic case with foam insert to keep them organized so you can keep them in a drawer and don't lose them. They are made of anodized aluminum, so they're going to hold up very well in your shop. The number 3 tool I think every beginner should buy is a miter saw. Now, I've done some reviews on some budget-friendly miter saws like the Win. It's a great pick if you're on a budget. If you have a little bit more money, I highly recommend the DeWalt DWS 779. This is a workhorse of a miter saw that will last you for years to come and do you a fine job. It's extremely accurate and it's extremely durable. This is my favorite miter saw that I've ever owned, even above the Festool Capex, because of the price, the quality, and the full features that you get. It's a sliding 12-inch miter saw. You got maximum capacity for cross cuts as well as bevels, angles, anything you're going to need. It's also extremely accurate. I've never had any accuracy issues with this miter saw. Repeatable, accurate cuts. So when you're building furniture, or you're building cutting boards or projects and you need that accuracy every single time and without having to try to set up jigs and stops, this is where this will help you. And when you start trying to cut miters, you're going to want something that you can set to a 45-degree or a 30 or a 20-degree angle and make that cut over and over and over, and it be the exact same every single time. That's where the miter saw shines, and I think most beginner woodworkers should have a miter saw in their shop. I think a router is an essential woodworking tool, especially for beginners. This opens up a whole lot for you. Now, should you pick cordless router or corded router, that's really up to you and what you're going to be doing. If you're doing mainly edge profiles and not a whole lot of grooves, mortises, anything like that, then a cordless router will do you just fine. I prefer the DeWalt or the Milwaukee if I'm choosing the best router, but the Ryobi does really well also. My pick for the first router you should buy is actually this router. I have a video dedicated just to this router. You can go check it out, but it includes a plunge base and a fixed base. That really opens up a lot of options for you, and it's extremely reasonably priced. That's a mouthful for what you're getting. I will say this, if you're looking at cordless routers and the feel in the hand matters to you, the DeWalt is by far the biggest as far as circumference goes. If you don't have big hands, this will be very uncomfortable to you to hold, where the Ryobi and the Rigid will be much more comfortable for smaller hands. The Milwaukee's kind of the better middle ground. It's kind of not too big, not too little. It's the Goldilocks of routers as far as feel goes. So a good sander is absolutely necessary for a beginner woodworker. Now there's so many options out there, literally dozens and dozens of sanders to choose from. So how do you know what's best for you in your shop? Well, I will tell you from personal experience, don't go the cheapest route. When I first started, I bought a Hyper Tough from Walmart. Matter of fact, that was the first video on this channel, was a Hyper Tough versus a DeWalt. The Hyper Tough wore out in just a few weeks, so that's why I went and bought a DeWalt. But there are lots of options out there for under $100, which I'm working on a full review of that now. As far as sandpaper goes, 80, 120, and 220 is typically all you'll ever use for the most projects. Rarely do I ever go up more than 220, and 9 times out of 10, I only sand 120 grit for most projects. It's plenty. I do like the 3M Cupitron paper better than the other papers that I've tried, but there are some other good options out there like Tiger Shark, Diablo, and some others. It rolls good. It's really a smooth glide. Super long cord. The way these work is there's a little slot there that this bag cardboard piece goes into. You press it onto the nozzle, and then this piece folds down and holds it in place, and that way all the dust is contained into this bag. So the front of the dust extractor has, I'm assuming, a volume of how much pull it's going to have, auto and manual. And then over here you can plug in here. When I power my sander on, this will automatically come on. So it has a wireless button down here that's going to be able to turn the, if I needed to turn the hose on for whatever reason, I just push that button. Let's sand something. We're going to give it a go right here.
So this dial here turns up or down the volume of suction you've got. Too much and it'll actually suck the board up, so it's really powerful. I can immediately tell a difference between this and the DeWalt based on the history I have with using that DeWalt. The DeWalt's a good sander, don't get me wrong, but you can tell that the level is up right here. This is a next level, and it's just, it doesn't vibrate my hand like that DeWalt. That DeWalt is really vibraty, and it really like buzzes your hand a lot. The suction on this thing, and that thing will pick a board up. You hear me? Watch. Max power. Minimum power. It'll almost pick it up. So I would think that's the minimum power, maybe just a little more suction is all you would really need for sanding. You don't want it to pick the board up or move the board. I wouldn't think that would be very beneficial. So right now, as it stands, initial impressions, I'm very impressed with the quality of this sander, the way it feels in my hand, the way it sands. I'm also impressed with the suction power of that dust extractor. I'm excited to have this in the shop. So for the last 3 months, I've used this exclusively as my sander. I did not use my DeWalt or my DeWalt dust extractor for sanding. I like this a lot. I think this is a very high quality tool. I know they cost a lot of money. Do I think they're worth the price? Yes. Listen, it's the little things that make the biggest differences when you're talking about stuff like this. As far as vibration goes on the Festool ETS 125 REQ, the vibration is much less. However, if you sand for long periods of time, like an hour, you'll still get that little stingy feeling because it's been so long and that vibration's in your hand. Now, shorter periods of time, I can tell a big difference between the Festool and the DeWalt sanders. I still think that for the common garage woodworker, weekend warrior woodworker who doesn't do a whole lot of projects, I think the DeWalt setup will do you just fine. I really do, as long as you're not doing a whole bunch. The dust extractor itself has a lot of suction, so it's sucking in a lot more of that fine dust. I've noticed much less fine dust in the shop. I love the fact that when I turn off this tool, about 3 seconds later, this shuts off. I really enjoy the fact that I can actually adjust the suction level of the dust extractor. So it depends on the tool I was using. So if I was using this with a circular saw or a router, I could actually crank that suction up and pull more of that dust in. I do like that. So 3 months later, I'm extremely pleased with that Festool. I think it's well worth the money. It's the little things, they just add up. You can tell they pay attention to detail. A bandsaw will literally change the game for you if you've never had one before. One of the main things you can do with the bandsaw when we're talking about dimensioning lumber is you can take and make smaller thin strips or resawing different thicknesses of your wood with a bandsaw, especially a good quality bandsaw or a full-size one. Now there's benchtop models that you can get. They're really good for cutting curves and things like that, but when you start trying to resaw boards, you're gonna want to get one that's really powerful and has enough distance between the bed and the top wheel up here so that you can cut thicker, wider boards. These are also much, much safer to use versus, say, a miter saw or something like that to cut small pieces, like little tiny pieces. These are really good for that. And there's virtually no way you can get a kickback on a saw like this versus a table saw. So they're much, much more safer as far as that goes. Now this blade is always spinning and you do have to still watch those fingers because it can cut you just like any other saw. When you get a bandsaw in the shop, you'll be able to do all kinds of cool stuff. I was able to make this little reindeer from Miss 731 just with this bandsaw right here. So it'll cut some really nice tight curves, as well as do some resawing and things like that. Sometimes I don't need the full 1 inch or 4/4 board. I just need a 1/4 inch piece or a 3/8 inch thick piece. And I can just take the piece over to the bandsaw and be able to cut that and get what I need out of it. A bandsaw just helps you to conserve lumber and thereby conserving that money. So basically it can pay for itself, right? This is a watchmaker's inspection magnifier. It magnifies 20x. Now here's where I use this in the shop, especially when I'm trying to read instructions on something. I can't really see that fine print sometimes. How long's the warranty on that? I ain't got my peepers out here or my spectacles if you're old enough. Oh,
a limited 2 year. This helps you get down and read that stuff pretty easy. Where I use this the most is if I have a router bit and it has the model number on there, I need to reorder that, I can look through this glass and actually read it where I can't read it just with my plain eyesight. You can also use this to inspect your saw blades to see if a piece of that carbide got chipped when you did hit that piece of metal, or just in general, you can see here, this blade is pretty dirty. I need to clean this one. If you combine that with your phone zoom feature, you can zoom in and really get a really magnified look at whatever you're trying to see. If you're trying to inspect a blade, if it's maybe gotten damaged or a bit that maybe got cracked or anything like that, this will help you find that. Also, you can use these to check your router bits to see how dull they are, if you've messed them up, if you hit something. So this is a really little handy tool for less than 10 bucks. You got to pick it up. You can throw this in a toolbox or a drawer or something like that, but basically all you're doing is you can even do like the old-timey jewelers, you know, they got that stuff they're looking at like this. If you don't have a crosscut sled, or if you've been old schooling it with like a speed square to try to get your square cuts, that works as far as fast setup goes, but it leaves a little bit to skill, and this will help you with that, especially if you're a beginner, because it gives you a little bit of a guide starting out on the cut, especially that first part there. It helps square that saw up to the stock that you're cutting, and then you can make those cuts. It even has like a blade set. They call it a cut line indicator or something. This is kind of gimmicky, this little plastic thing that slides out. They should have just left that off. But as far as cutting cross-cut square, this will work, and it gives you a 45-degree cross-cut, which is super handy to have. This is a nice little jig to have in the shop, especially if you just want to make good square cuts with your circular saw. 2-in-1 countersink and driver bit. I like this because, one, it's made in the USA, right there in the great state of Montana, and it's a 2-in-1. So if you do a lot of countersink, you know how frustrating it is to swap back and forth on bits, especially if you only have one drill. This is super handy because you have the driver bit on one end and then you flip it over and you have the countersink on the other. And they're really good bits. They drill a nice clean hole. And then on the driver bit side, you can swap those out for any 1/4-inch drive. So if you're using star drive or anything like that, like this nice little DeWalt set, you can put any star drive or any other flat, Phillips, whatever you're using, and this will adapt to that. The way this 2-in-1 bit works is similar to an air fitting or a pneumatic fitting. Push forward on this little brass fitting and you can remove the bit, flip it over, put the other end in, and then pull back, and that locks it in place. You can also, again, swap those bits out with an Allen key. The Allen key is not necessary to be there because these are magnetic, so it'll hold your bits in there magnetically, but for a little extra security, you can use that Allen key. Make sure your bit doesn't come out, and that's very frustrating when it happens, so it's nice that they added that. They sell this in a set for a little over $20, and it comes with extra drill bits and driver bits. That's one I would recommend. Every shop should have a set of screwdrivers. Now, I know a lot of people, all of you probably have drills and drivers and things, but there is a time and a place for screwdrivers, and I personally don't spend big bucks on hand tools. I just don't use them enough. So this is why this set is perfect. This is a Craftsman set. I think there's 8 of these in the set. I've used the mess out of these for almost over a year now. I have seen zero wear. You may see it, well, I won't say zero. On the tips of, say, the Phillips, you'll see where basically the coloring has been knocked off, but the actual metal is still just like it was the day we met, just like the day when I got them in the shop. You describe the day you got your tools as the day you met. Anyway, these are really handy to have for about $26-ish, I think, is what I gave for them. 8 screwdrivers, Craftsman brand, while not the old Craftsman brand. Like some of these wrenches here, hand-me-downs from my father-in-law. These are true American Craftsmans. Though, like, these are just really good to have in the shop for the price. They're just stupid cheap. Be sure to stick around for after number 5. I've got a bonus pick for you that I think you'll love. Next up is the eye gauging router depth and saw guide. You can set up your saw blades with this. You can set up your fence distances with this. You can set up your router bits with this, all with that digital accuracy. You can switch between inches and millimeters, so it doesn't matter if you're in your good old US or anywhere else that doesn't use imperial, then you can use any of these measurements that fit your needs. It also comes with 3 what they call anvils that will replace the bottom one there so that you can swap those out if you need a little extra depth. This one right here stores right here on the right. You're able to lock that in at any point. You can zero it out at any point. And this base is made out of anodized aluminum with laser etched markings, so it's going to hold up for you. It does have these preset gauges here on the end, and that's really handy to set up the fence distance, especially on the router table. So if I want to be able to set the depth of this router bit, I'm just going to lower it down until it touches the table, zero that out, and then I can raise this up to 0.25. I want to cut a 1/4-inch groove in a board. Then I can just move it over to the router bit, raise my router up until it touches the gauge. Then I know it's set at 0.25. Don't have to worry about it. Or for quick and dirty measurements, there are scales on each side, 1 in millimeter, 1 in imperial. So you can just basically set it up very fast if you don't need that digital precision right then and there. You can also use this at the table saw to set your blade depth and also check depths of holes, things like that with it. You should never pay full price for any tool really, especially when you can get great deals on stuff like this planer and many other tools. I have a text alert that I'll send out really good tool deals, like on that when it goes on sale. All you have to do is text the word deals to the number on the screen and I'll let you know when awesome tool deals come available. Number 5 tool on the list is a Festool. Don't leave. Hear me out again. This is the most controversial tool on YouTube. This is the Festool Domino. Now, it's $1,500 no matter which way you slice it. And as far as tool deals go, you're probably never gonna find a sale or a deal on a Festool tool. They just do not put them on sale. So you're gonna pay full price. That's probably one of the only tools you pay full price for. Maybe, you let me know. So why is a Festool Domino worth that much money? Time savings. That's it. This thing is one of the best tools to use if you're making a lot of product, especially joinery products. So chairs, tables, tabletops, table bases, anything, cabinets, you name it. Like this is one of the most useful tools you can buy. Number one, it's easy to use. I could literally give this to a beginner and they could pretty much figure this out pretty quick. Like it's not hard to use. Number two is it's extremely accurate. You can get repeatable results with this every single time. When I built this coffee table, I was able to do all the joinery with this. It was the first project I used this domino on and I was like, oh my goodness, this thing is awesome. And then I did the tabletop the same way with breadboard ends with a domino. This thing come out phenomenal. It is awesome. I love this table. It's a cool little project. And this domino really shined in that video. I'll link to that video in the description if you want to go watch the farmhouse table build. This was the main tool used in that video. So you'll be able to see how it works and how well it does. So for $1,500, could you get a different tool that was much cheaper and do very similar results? Probably so, but it's going to take you much longer. So if you're doing doweling or you're doing mortise and tenon, all that's going to take much, much longer than this does. The Festool Domino is just in a league on its own. There are a lot of competitors to the Festool Domino, but there are also none that really stack up and do the exact same thing that this does, as good as it does, as fast as it does. That's a lot of it does. This thing's awesome. This is the tool that everybody said, hey, you gotta get one of these. Like I had tons of people telling me, this is it. If you want one tool that's really useful that you're gonna love having in the shop, pick this up. Let me show you what it can do. First and foremost, it's extremely well made. It's very strong. It'll hold like 600 pounds. It has 2,200 pounds of clamping force. This thing is a beast. It also is very compact when it needs to be. As you can see here, it folds up to that. I mean, it's gonna take up very little space. If you're in a small space and you need a sawhorse / clamp, this is the tool. So you see this bar actually slides into this slot. This handle holds these two legs up, and speaking of the legs, they have rubber feet on them to help grip, and it won't hurt hardwood floors if you have to take it in someone's house. To fold it out, to make it where you can work with it, you just turn this little knob right here, very simple. You're gonna pick up this rod and extend it out, and it locks into place, and you'll just turn the knob. Then you'll fold the feet down. They also lock into position. It's got some heft to it. It's not overly heavy, but it's solid. That comes off. I was going to show you how solid it is. I almost busted my tail. So I weigh 200 pounds, right? This thing is super solid. Super solid. Now the clamping capacity on this thing's 37 inches. They make a model that's $100 more that will actually hold a full sheet of plywood up to 49 inches wide, which is awesome. This was made to hold doors basically because it goes up to, what I say, 37 inches and the door is usually about 36 inches. So it'll hold that. So at this point it's a little over 18.5 inches this way. However, this actually flips around, slides into that track, and you can clamp down to literally nothing. So if you're working by yourself, this thing is super handy because it has the foot pedal, which is actually the clamp. If you can see, the clamp moves in when you pump the brakes. When you get it to where you want it and you don't want it to move, you're just gonna flip that switch right there. That's gonna lock that in place. You've got it clamped down, it's not going anywhere. To release the pressure or to release that clamp, you just unlock it. Push the foot pedal in, unlock that, and then just released. One thing to note about these jaws is that they have this plastic material on there that won't mar or mark up or cause damage to any stock that you're using. To fold it back up, these are locking switches for each of the front two legs. You can see they have a wide stance and you can actually bolt them down if you so chose to do so. Then on the back, here's the little knob. It's well built. Gives good tension. You just push that up, pull this down, and this lets it free swing at that point. You can clamp most anything with this thing. This is round stock. If I need to clamp to work on that or drill into that, that's gonna be solid. The fact that I can operate the clamping system with my foot and it leaves my hands free is awesome, because there's been many times I'm trying to clamp something or just get something held in place. You don't have a free hand. Well, this allows you to do that, and it disengages with the foot. It's just 2 thumbs up in my opinion. At the table saw, you can use these slots that are graduated at 1/8 inch increments to set up the height of your blade. Now, the only drawback to this is it won't set up on its own like the DFM setup gauge, but the DFM is a one-use type tool, and this is a 5-in-1, so you just kind of weigh your options there. But it's really not that hard to hold it while you set your blade height. Number 2, this sliding gauge will let you set depths or heights of things like router bits, or you can do half laps or anything like that, because the bottom is exactly whatever the top is. So if you're setting the bottom depth here, that whatever it's sticking out on the top is going to be the same. Next is the side gauges on here. Is going to let you set your bit heights at the router, fixed or plunge base, or your router table. This is really where this little gauge shines in my opinion. All you have to do is set this on top of your router table or the base of your router, set that bit height, and you're off and running. Super easy to use. If you need to check the angle of your chisels, there are 4 places to do that on here: a 30 degree, a 60 degree, a 40 degree, and a 25 degree for those chisels. Also, if you sharpen your own drill bits, there's a few places to check the angle on those, whether you're using 118 degrees, 98, 82, or 136. For under 30 bucks, this thing is handy as a shirt pocket. Some of the best squares you can buy for this price point. I didn't even know they made this until I saw it just a couple of weeks ago. This is the Swanson Trim Square. It's about 4.5 inches long. It is 4.5 inches long, and if you've watched my channel at all, you know that I really like my little small squares. The original Dell Square, the DFM Square, and even the Dell Square SS, but they are all 3 much more expensive than this, because these both together are only about $26, and if you split them up, then you're only looking at about $13 per square, which is an extremely good deal for a very good quality speed square or small trim square and a combination square. If you compare that to the DFM square, it's about $40. The Dell Square is about, I don't know, $80, $90. And then you have the Dell Square SS that comes in at about $120. So if you're just getting started, you need a small square, then check this combo out. Especially because it does have the combination square, which you can use to set depths, mark lines, all kinds of other stuff. And then you have the small speed square that's gonna let you do angles, basically draw square lines on small stock, just handy to have in the shop. These 2 squares are some of the most used squares you'll use in a wood shop, especially because they're so small, you'll be grabbing them all the time. A sanding accessory that's very inexpensive but extremely useful, especially to keep you from damaging corners and edges when you're sanding. This is a sanding pad. It's foam, it squishes down so that when you're sanding that edge, it actually collapses and doesn't let the sandpaper dig in and cause damage. This is probably one of the least expensive on the list, but I saved it for last because I really like it. It's really good. This is a Festool brand. Don't worry about the name on this one. There's other brands out there. I'll link those in the description. They're equally as good. The way this works is if the hook and loop sticks to your sander, then the sandpaper actually sticks to the sanding pad. As you can see that it actually compresses down on that corner. Will it damage the corner? Of course, if you're sitting there holding it on there, or if you're not moving, it will still sand that corner or that edge. But if this was a round over and you didn't want to make it look ununiform, because a lot of times when you're sanding a round over, even if you think you're moving fast enough and you're doing this, that doesn't work. You'll wind up with some imperfections, especially when you start putting finish on. So this actually prevents you from hurting it too much and doing damage unless you just hold it in one spot. If I don't want to round that over and I want to take away that sharp edge like this right here, I was able to just sand that. All you're doing is moving the sander and it'll automatically do it because this sanding pad is compressing around that corner. If you watched my recent charcuterie board build video, you saw me use this pad in there, and it was because I had rounded those over with an 1/8 inch round over, and I wanted those to stay uniform. This is perfect for that. It's inexpensive and they just work. The Swanson Speed Square. I've had a Swanson Speed Square since I started working. In other words, I graduated high school in 1995 and went to work construction just a week or two later, and this was one of the first tools I ever bought. They're invaluable to have in your shop. Let me show you. One awesome thing about the Speed Square is the fact that it's fast. It's a speed square, so you just lay it on the piece of stock that you're going to mark. This ledge here will hold it against the edge of your board, and then now you've got a perfect 90-degree angle to this edge. And then you can just mark it. That's one of the great things about a Speed Square. It also has these scribe marks in here, or indentions, so that you can hold and draw a parallel line to the edge of the board at 1 inch all the way up to about 2 1/4. You can do 1 inch. You can do 2 inches. It also has 0 to 45 degrees all the way up the edge of the square, but you can also just draw a 45-degree line like that. There are some other features on here that I've never used and probably never will. The hip and the valley, as well as the common pitch for roofs. That's what these are for. I don't use those, so I'm not a roofer. But if you are, there you go. It doesn't matter which way you lay the square on your stock, you've got all the markings the same. Also, the great thing about a Speed Square is it'll stand up on its own, so it's perfect for checking the 90 on saw blades, routers, things like that. I said this is often imitated because there's a lot of cheap knockoffs out there. I've bought 1 or 2 in my past, and they're not good. They don't last. This is a good thick blade on it, so it's about 3/16, a little over 3/16, almost a 1/4 inch thick. And I've only owned 1 or 2 of these in my life, because once you buy them, they're pretty much lifetime tools, because it's really hard to break one of these or bend it without some type of major action happening. This thing will last you a very long time, and it's just a good solid investment. And when I say investment, they don't cost much at all. I don't care if you have Woodpeckers tools, I don't care if you have Harbor Freight tools, it doesn't matter. This is one of those tools that everybody should have. Personally, I think this is just a no-brainer tool to have. And one of the main features nobody talks about is the fact that you can twirl it and then act like you holster it. A push block. If you're using the ones that come with your jointer, or if you've had them with your router table, these kind like this is what come with the Wahuda. They're really small, they're really jinky. The rubber on them's not great. As you can see here, it's chipped off. It just doesn't last very long. These are by Bench Dog. These are awesome. The rubber's a little bit thicker, it's a little more durable, but more importantly, it's a lot bigger. The handles are a lot fatter, not a lot, but a little bit fatter. Get a better grip on these. They also have a rubber grip that actually grips to them, where these are just plastic and slippery. You have a lot more surface area on the Bench Dog brand to grip with than you do on these, and it's kind of striking how much difference there is. I mean, it's a push block, I know, but that's a lot of extra grip and push that you could push through the jointer, around the table, or around the router. It just gives your hands that much more distance away from the blades and the bits, and I recommend these. These may be the closest rivals I've ever seen at a fraction of the price. I'm impressed, y'all, because these are aluminum based, but they are a stainless steel blade, so you don't have to worry about corrosion, and they have a ton of features packed in. Now, this set comes with a 7-inch and a 4-inch, but you can buy them separately if you wish. Each one of these squares have holes in them at 1/8 inch increments so that you can draw parallel lines to the edge of your stock, which is great for layout. I also like how easily these are to read. They're a satin finish. Even though it's stainless steel, it's not too shiny, so it doesn't glare on you. And you just got those graduated marks all the way up the long side of that triangle, all the way from 0 to 90. That helps you lay out angles. I love the fact that they've thought of 2 ways to get measurements off of this as far as on a square goes. If you look, the scale starts at the top side of the base going up the scale, so when you lay that on the edge of the stock, you're measuring from the edge of the stock up. However, if you turn the square on its edge, the scale starts at 0 here, so you can use this edge to set up blade heights, bit heights, fence distances, anything like that. Notice that the blades are also offset from center, and what that's going to allow you to do is mark for center of a 3/4 inch stock, or lay out mortise and tenon on 3/4 inch stock. As far as the scale accuracy on these squares, you're getting extremely accurate measurements. At 0.0015 of an inch, you're not going to notice any deviation there woodworking. And the squareness of each square is plus or minus 0.005 thousandths of an inch. I mean, you don't need any more accuracy than that. Building any common woodworking project, the wood's gonna move more than that. Each square even has a hole in it just made for hanging it up. So you can keep them up off the workbench and safe. They even include instructions and a mechanical pencil with extra lead. Again, probably the closest competitor to Woodpecker's quality and accuracy that I've seen at a fraction of the cost. This is a right angle drill attachment. It's actually designed for impacts like that. It even says impact ready on the box. However, you can use it in a regular drill. It'll work exactly the same. There's actually several brands or makes of these. This is actually an older model. It still works perfectly fine. I just picked up the new model just to show you what the new one looks like. So the way this works is it attaches to your drill or your impact in here, and then you can attach any bit that you want. I use this a lot for pocket holes when I get into a tight space and I can't fit a pocket hole driver bit because they're so long into a space. But there's a knuckle joint in there that turns. It helps everything just turn the same. If I needed to drive a screw up into this tight space, my regular drill won't even fit in there. I can use this right angle adapter to get in there. You even still get the impact that you still get that through this front 90-degree adapter. There's a multitude of uses for this little tool. And if you don't have one, I guarantee you, if you go buy it, the next time you need it in a tight space, you're gonna come back to this video and comment and thank me for showing you this. If you're interested in any of the tools you see in this video today, there'll be a link in the description below to each one. I've got this center punch as a spring-loaded center punch or nail set. These things are awesome to have in the shop. Let me show you. If you've ever been trying to drill a hole in a specific spot and you put your drill bit on there and it starts walking around, this will fix that. All you do is set it on there. All you do is set it on there and just push down. And that click you hear is actually the spring popping it into place. You see that mark that it made. When you go to drill, your drill bit has a reference to start on and it's not gonna walk on you. So this thing has a sharp point on it that it goes down to so that you can actually set where you actually need to make the hole. That's the whole thing about this thing. It helps you make precise spots to put a hole. That way you don't mess up. You don't get your drawer pulls out of level. It doesn't look like crap. I've actually used these to mark where I'm going to drill holes for drawer pulls and things like that. I actually use it on the workbench as you see here. Also on the closet built-ins, I use this to set where I was going to pre-drill for those drawer pulls. Good starter spot. It is even sitting in there securely now. It's not going to move and wiggle out of there. They're cheap and you'll like having it in the shop. Number 3 on the list, gator lift. If you use sheet goods, plywood, MDF, anything like that, this thing will help you, especially if you work alone like I do most of the time. I'm having to move the sheet goods around the shop by myself, or even from the truck to the shop, or even from the store to the truck. So if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, you can take this with you to help you load sheet goods onto a cart so that it makes it just easier for you. Let me show you how it works. So typically if you're picking up sheet goods, how do you do it by yourself? Most of us bend down, grab the end and try to waller it around onto the table or onto the table saw like you see here. You get in a bind extremely easy and fast with such a bulky piece of wood. And they're not light, especially MDF. This is a 5/8 inch sheet of MDF. 5/8 even by itself is pretty heavy. This thing has 2 grip pads on the inside. They're rubber, kind of sticky feeling. All you do is slip it onto the sheet and then pick up. That is so much easier than trying to wrestle this thing with both hands. Now I can just maneuver this around the shop. Is it heavy? I mean, I'm holding a whole sheet of plywood or a whole sheet of MDF with one arm. It's not light, but it's manageable. And that's what this thing does. It helps you manage sheet goods by yourself. To get it off, once you let the sheet good down, all you do is pick it up and it comes right off. It just creates a pinch or tension on the sheet when you pick it up. If you've got 2 of these and 2 people, then you could have one on each end to make it that much easier for you working with sheet goods, trying to carry them on the job site or in your shop. The Maska Twin Jig. If you're a beginner woodworker on a budget, the Maska Twin Pocket Hole Jig is one of the most affordable jigs you can get to get you started making projects. I'll drop a link to this one and one that just has a drill bit, but this one actually has the drill bit, driver bit, the jig, and just a few screws to get you started. I've actually had this for quite a while, and these are perfect for getting into those small spaces, or when you build cabinets or shop furniture and you forgot to put that pocket hole on there. If I wanted to put a face frame on my miter station here, and I needed to put pocket holes on there to attach it with, I could obviously bring this over here and attach it just like this, clamp it down. I could drill from it back there just like that, but I could only go so high before I would actually have to take it off of this mounting board. Sweet, ain't it? That's a Pocket Hole King edition Mask of Pocket Hole jig with this awesome mounting board. Now, how much easier would it be for me just to bring a small jig over, clamp that in place, and then drill my pocket holes with this? I can get all the way up to the edge with it, all the way down to the bottom. It's just more convenient, and it's more ideal for getting into small places, especially if you're like me and you forget to put a pocket hole somewhere. The great thing about this jig that I haven't seen on other jigs featured is you can actually remove this piece and get it flush up against the bottom of something. So if I did forget to put pocket holes in here, I could actually come in and put this in later and flush it up to the bottom and not have to worry about that lip that has to hang over on most jigs. It's a Swiss Army knife. This thing is awesome. So a lot of people carry a Leatherman or some type of multi-tool, and while I tried that for a while, those things are just big. And when you put them in your pocket, they weigh you down. They get, I don't know, I just don't like that much weight in the pocket. This, on the other hand, of course, Swiss Army knives make all shapes and sizes, but this one in particular is my favorite. I've had it for years. They're very durable and they have so many functions. Let me show you. First and foremost, it's stupid, but it's got a toothpick. And yes, I've used that a few times. It also has a pair of tweezers if you need to pull out that splinter. You can attach it to a key ring if you wish. On the bottom side is a Phillips head screwdriver. One thing to note about the Phillips head screwdriver is actually when it's extended and you grab it like this, it gives you a little bit of leverage, so you can actually put quite a bit of torque on a little screw. And I've used this dozens of times. There's little to no wear on the end of it, and I have used it and used it and used it. So it'll hold up for a long time. On the bottom side, as well as a scratching awl, I've actually used this multiple times to make a mark on a board when I can't find my pencil. On the top side, you got a flathead screwdriver and a can opener. And then on this side, you have a different style can opener that'll actually punch holes in aluminum, things like that. Got a little nail file with a point. It includes a pocket knife. I use it all the time. You can actually see how gross and crusty it is. It even has a pair of scissors. I actually use these quite regularly too. And they're spring loaded, so it pops right back. And it has tons of pocket lint because I keep that in my pocket. This is my bonus pick. This is a Star brand combination square. It's insanely expensive. Is it worth it? This thing's $100, sometimes a little less if it's on sale for a 6-inch combination square. Insane, but it's one of my favorite tools I've ever bought. Is this worth $100? That's really subjective. Most people, I think, is gonna say no. Let me know in the comments what you think. This piece is actually cast iron and not some type of aluminum or just stamped metal. And then this is actually a chrome finish. I wish they would make that stainless because I got a little wood glue on the end. As you see here, it kind of rusted a little bit. One of the cool things about this combination square in particular is on one side you have 1/8 inch increments and 1/16. And then on the other side of the blade you have 32nd and 64th. It's not often that I need something that goes down to 32nd or 64th. But when I need to get precise measurements for whatever reason, this is the tool I grab. I've got all of these other measuring and layout tools available to me. Some are less expensive, some are more expensive, but I keep grabbing this one every time I'm in the shop. I don't regret buying it. I spent my own money on this tool, and it's one of my most used tools in the shop. And the way I kind of judge expensive tools is, I ask myself, will I regret buying this in 6 months? This was a no. I don't regret it. There's actually a Swanson brand that's very similar to this, same size, 6 inches. I'm not saying you go buy this one specifically, depending on your budget, you buy what you like. But I would recommend getting a small 6-inch combination square like this. They're just extremely handy. I'll put 2 options in the description, this one and then a more budget-friendly one. If you don't have a track saw or the budget for a high-end track saw and need to make long, straight, accurate cuts, I'm impressed with this one, y'all. Let me show you. First thing you want to do is put these tracks together, and these are 2 27.5-inch tracks, much like the Ryobi track saw. I think that the companies are doing these shorter tracks for shipping and packaging. You can get all that stuff in one small package, That way it ships easier. Now, if you want to cut anything longer than, say, a 4-foot cut across a sheet of plywood, so you're going to cut the length of the plywood, you'll need to pick up an extra pack. However, it's still much cheaper to do that versus buying a track saw. The first thing I noticed when I unboxed these is that they include end caps on their tracks. Nobody else is doing that. Festool's not, Milwaukee didn't, Ryobi didn't, KREG didn't. I've yet to see anybody include those track guards on the end. That's pretty awesome because that'll tear your hoses and cords and things like that up. So I'm glad that they included those. So when you connect them, you're just going to take those two ends that are going together, take those caps off. Now you can certainly just use one of these small tracks if you just want to cut small parts. In other words, across a 2x6 or a 2x8 or anything like that. A lot of people like these shorter tracks. They did include some track connectors that you use to connect these tracks together. They're just going to slide in those slots. Now there is a little place side to side there, so you're going to want to make sure to get these lined up before you tighten them down. I like to use a straight edge. You could use a 4-foot level, anything like that. That's one of the reasons I like having a precision straight edge in the shop, so just like this. You also want to make sure you're on a flat surface when you're connecting these up. Perfectly flush there. That's what we wanted. Track lines up perfectly. So far, so good. Now to get this saw trolley, I don't know what they're going to call this, but this red piece that goes on the track, to get the saw ready to go on there, you want to get that set on the track. It comes with 4 cams basically that's going to twist and lock that in place. So you want to tighten those up so that there's no play on there, but it's snug, but not too snug that it's not going to glide smoothly, just like if you were adjusting a track saw to a track. I like that they did this. As you can see, this saw guide will fit a multitude of different circular saws. Almost all of them should fit on this saw guide. It also comes with a blade spacer. This is going to make sure that you're setting the blade distance on this track perfectly every time, no matter what saw you're using. And it sets inside this, so you know you're going to lock it in there. And then you're just going to set your circular saw up there and lock it in place. These slide to adjust. You're pressing the blade up against that spacer. It's going to leave a small space there. That way it's accurate when you put it on the track. Now we'll tighten these down and lock it in place. Now you got 4 clamps that clamp your circular saw into place. It's going to hold it flat against that plate. In other words, you're going to be able to get a good 90-degree cut because it's sitting flat on this guide rail. After you get that cinched down on there, it's ready to rock. One thing to consider is battery size. I noticed my 4 amp hour batteries were rubbing that post on the thumb screw. I will likely trim that off, but 2 amp hour, 3 amp hour batteries will fit just fine. Just something to consider. And that post you can't move. So I wish they would have considered that when they made this. Everything can't be perfect. I will say at full depth that these batteries get in the way, but if you're cutting 3/4 plywood, anything where you raise your saw up, depending on how the battery attaches to your saw, on this rigid, it is not in the way. As you can see, there's plenty of room there to use that 4 amp hour battery. Now, if your saw doesn't have batteries that attach to the back, if it goes to the side, this won't even be an issue for you. Now, just like any other track saw track, you're gonna have to cut the splinter guard to fit or match your saw, which once you cut that, it should match any saw because of the saw blade spacer that they provide, because it's putting it in the exact right spot every time. At least that's the theory. Now, one of the main reasons you want a track saw is to cut straight, but also to cut square. That way, if you're cutting thicker woods like this 2-inch chunk of walnut, we can make sure that we get a good square cut on this. And we did get a good square cut with that circular saw using the track. So I was actually quite impressed with that. At this thickness, the quality of your circular saw is going to matter here. If you've got a less quality circular saw that flexes a lot on that base, then it may cause you some trouble. But if you got a good solid circular saw, you'll be able to get nice square cuts with that. And that full size 7 1/4 circular saw will cut through a 2-inch block of walnut. So you got plenty of depth there to cut most anything using this Mousecraft system.
I'm in the system.
The way this rides on the track is fairly interesting to me. I got the battery out so we don't cut her hand off here. But you can see it rides on that single lip that's popped up off of that track. This is a proprietary track, big word for redneck. Or in other words, you can't use your current track saw on this track or use any other items with this track. But you can see that it rides on that, basically a piece of plastic there, and it rides down that lip. That makes sure it stays on track, just like a train riding on the tracks. These tension bearings here, you just tighten those up, and that keeps it from moving side to side, so you get a nice square cut that doesn't move on you. One thing you can't do is bevel at this current setting, because when I start beveling, it just moves everything off. So if you went all the way over and tried to cut riding on that same track, you would absolutely cut that track. It will not cut at a bevel. using this circular saw on this track. So this is a 90-degree cut only. For about $100 for this kit with 2 tracks, this thing is an absolute steal if you don't have a table saw, or if you do have a table saw and you just break down a bunch of sheet goods, this is the perfect tool for you if you already have a circular saw. This is one of the best saw guides that I've ever used, and I've used a few of them before with the KREG system. They're plastic, they work pretty good, but this is really solid. Now, this is not perfect, and it is absolutely not a replacement for a track saw, and I'll tell you why. Number one, a track saw will allow you to bevel no matter what, and this, when you bevel, it will hit that track with this saw. I don't know how other saws will work, but I think that's going to be a problem for a lot of people if you need to cut 45s or bevels, anything like that. Also, there's no plunge feature like a plunge saw, track saw will plunge easily. This, you could do it, but it would make it a little sketchy and might cause a kickback, and that's another thing you're losing here is there's no anti-kickback anything on here. Another drawback is dust collection. A track saw has much better dust collection. Even some of the lower end track saws are better than a circular saw, so you will be giving that up if you pick this over a track saw. During the initial setup process, I said that I really liked how these had the included end caps there. They pop off too easy. In other words, when the saw gets to the end of the track, it'll actually push them off. Even though they're flush-ish, it kind of pushes them away and dislodges them. I wish they were tighter in there. There's no way to tighten them up, but just by the way they're made with these little clips. It's a nicety to have, but it's not well implemented. You'll likely lose those and or chunk them. Like we said earlier, this is a game changer for those who need a solid system to rip down sheet goods. I can't recommend this enough. If you have about $100 to invest in something like this, this is one of the most solid systems I've seen on the market. I am very impressed with this. The tracks go together well. Everything just works. Pretty good job. It's by far not perfect, as I stated before, but it is extremely well made and will do what you want it to do as far as making straight square cuts. I give this a 4 out of 5 fist bumps, and I don't give that lightly. What do you get with each saw? Each one comes with its own set of features and its own warranty and things like that. So I want to break that down first. The wind, what you're going to get versus the other two. The wind can cut 0 to 45 degrees. It actually has 47 on the gauge, but it says 0 to 45 on their specs. It can cut at 1 5/8 inches deep at 45. It can cut a 2.3 inches deep at 90. Now, the KREG actually cuts 1.5 inches at 45, and it'll cut 2 1/8 inches at 90 degrees. The Festool 1 11/16 inches at 45 and 2 1/8 at 90. Now the KREG and the Festool both will cut from -1 to 47 degrees to help you fit things in stuff that's not quite 90. The Wind has a 10 amp brushed motor, the old school brushes, these little doohickeys that you can put in there when the other ones wear out. The Festool and the KREG both have brushless motors, so you don't have to worry about changing those out. The KREG's motor is a 12 amp, and this is a variable speed saw where the Wind is not. The Wind is 1 speed and that's it. The KREG and the Festool both have variable speed. Price with tracks, the Wind was $179. I went and looked it up, $179.03 actually, tax and all shipped to me. The KREG, which was given to me by KREG, which I'm gonna now give to one of you, is $419 with track. So with the Festool, this is a TSC 55 KEB Plus, which means you get the battery is a charger and a track with it. That's $800 all included. Now with the Wind, you get the track saw and the track and the cardboard boxes that come in. With the KREG, you actually get the carry bag, which is really nice. It's a really nice canvas bag. It'll hold up very well. And then with the Festool, of course, you get a sustainer box to keep it in. As far as warranties go, the Wind has a 2-year warranty. The KREG has a 2-year warranty. And then the Festool has a 3-year all-inclusive warranty, even including wear and tear. So that actually adds a little value if you're going to need that to be replaced, and they don't really care basically how it tore up so long as you didn't like run over it with a truck. If you're just using it normally and it tears up in 3 years old, they'll replace it. And with Festool, a cool side note is they actually have a 10-year guarantee on all spare parts. So like the splinter guard, or maybe your depth stop, or any of that stuff that you need in the next 10 years that may or may not get broke, they have a guarantee that they're gonna have that for 10 years on your tool, so you ain't gotta worry about running out of parts for it. If they don't have the part, they actually give you the upgraded model of the tools. That's cool. Now, they all three have an anti-kickback feature of some kind. If you go watch the review, I really break down each one of these. There's an individual review for each one. I'll put a link to each review in the description so you can go check those out. But this is basically a cam that locks that in to the anti-kickback. The Festool The KREG, excuse me, is very much similar, but a little different. It has a cam lock that prevents it from sliding back for the most part. The Festool actually has this little piece that looks like a riving knife, but it's actually not in line with the blade. And then if that is activated, the blade has an electronic brake that actually stops within 2 seconds. Speaking of riving knives, that's one of the things I really enjoyed about the KREG Track Saw was it actually has a riving knife, much like what is on your table saw. It's going to keep your boards from pinching as it actually makes the cut. I really like that feature a lot. Build quality on each tool. So you got basically $200, $400, $800 if we're kind of generalizing things. So that's kind of the price range you got here. Actually, the Wind for $200 is a pretty good build quality. The only issue I had with it was when you bevel or go to 45 or anything off of 0, has a lot of blade deflection or flex in the pivot mechanism, and it's going to cause some major issues, I think. But at 90, it's fine. This housing is actually some type of aluminum. This housing is also aluminum, and then this housing also probably some type of aluminum. Don't quote me on those. They're metal, they're not plastic, so these housings are nice. There's nothing that really stands out about the grips on them. These have slightly bigger grips as far as on top, whereas the Festool's slightly smaller. The KREG and the Festool both have splinter guards that will adjust up and down. This one's toolless, so you can just unloosen this and move this up and down as needed and then tighten it back. The KREG does have the tools stored in the handle just like that, and that's for blade changes and adjusting things like the splinter guard. The Festool also has tool storage in the handle, and then the Wind has the tool storage, basically just a rubber piece that you can slide your Allen wrench into on the cord. I don't like that because it continues to hang on things. Each saw is able to lock the blade down at the lower position so that you can change the blade. Blade change is really easy, and each one comes with its own blade, and actually each blade is pretty good. Now, the lesser of the blades is going to be the Wind. It costs a lot less, but the KREG and the Festool both come with really, really good blades. They all have depth stops. The Festool is the easiest to move up and down. You just press in and it slides and it locks back in place. The Wind is the hardest to move. It kind of jams up on you like it is there. Once you get it moving, it'll go and then you tighten it down. The KREG moves up and down easily, and it's just got a thumb screw that tightens it in place. I really like the fact that the KREG has markings for the 3/4 inch plywood marking, so you know exactly where you're going to be cutting 3/4 inch plywood, and it has a max depth on the bottom. I like that. I like how they got that marked out. The bevel gauges on the KREG and the Festool are far superior to that of the Wind. The Wind is black on black, so it's hard to see, and then the Festool and the KREG are both white on a dark background, so you can see them easily. The KREG and the Festool also come with an ability to go past 45, and it's actually part of their specs, so you can go to 47 or -1 like we talked about. Both of those have little switches that you can pull to make them go past what they normally would at the positive stop of 45 or 0. All three saws can be tensioned onto the track so that you don't get any side-to-side slop. As far as movement goes on the track, the KREG and the Festool move the easiest on the track, whereas the Wind is has a little more friction to it, and it's a little more finicky, as I talked about in the review, where it has that fence lock or the track lock where it locks onto the track. It's kind of, it's annoying. Let's take a look at the tracks and see what difference is there. So the tracks are very similar. If you look at them stacked on top of each other, they all have this channel on top. They all have the track that the saw runs on. They all have these colored skids or plastic or some type of material that will allow the saw to glide a little easier. You will notice the difference in lengths. The Wind is actually 50-inch track, but you get 2, so you actually get 100 feet or 100 inches in one that you can connect up, so that's pretty cool. Then the Festool is 55 inches, and then the KREG is the longest of all at 62 inches, which is actually quite a big positive because you can actually make a full depth plunge and rip all the way across a sheet of plywood, or if you had multiple sheets stacked up and you were making one big pass there, that would be beneficial. Where you can still do that with the Festool, it's starting to squeeze you in, and then with the Wind, it's really cramping your style at 50 inches because it's really hard to make a 48-inch cut and have enough room left over on each end for the saw. What I find very interesting is the Festool will fit on a Wind track perfectly. It's made just like the Wind as far as where the guide track is, whereas the KREG track fits neither one, the Festool or the Wind, because the way the guide track is inset a little further to the right. One last thing to note on the tracks is on the Festool and the KREG, both of these grip pads on the bottom are pretty sticky. They grip really well on the stock you're cutting. The Wind is much slicker and it doesn't stick to what you're cutting with. I would highly recommend using clamps with this one. The splinter guard is pretty sticky as well to help that grip. On the Wind it's still slick, and then on the Festool it's actually slick too, but these are so grippy it doesn't really matter that much. You may notice that the KREG saw is different hand than the Festool or the Wind actually. The KREG, as they say, is marketed more toward right-handed or be more right-handed friendly, where I don't know if anybody markets left-handed friendly, but both of these would be more left-handed friendly saws, the Wind and the Festool. I've used all three and haven't really had any issues on which direction the saw is going. Kind of got the basic comparison on all three. Now I want to cut with all three and let you see how they perform on plywood as well as on hardwood, so you can kind of make a better buying decision on which one's right for you. Now remember, if you want a full breakdown on each of these saws, there are full detail reviews on each one linked in the description. All right, so I'm gonna try to get a full cut on this plywood. This is 3/4 inch plywood. See what we can do. So I had to back it way up off the track to be able to cut that very end off, and it's only about 1 inch on each end to be able to go all the way across. So this track's pretty short. You could get 48-inch cut, but it's really difficult and almost unsafe feeling when you get it all the way off of that track, especially if you were cutting something thicker. And you maybe could hear it bog down a little bit in the 3/4 inch plywood. The saw is a tad underpowered. Now, this is what I was talking about on the way these saws are made. This one's going to have to cut this way to get this cut, whereas the Festool and the Wind go the other way. Not a big deal, but they are opposite of each other. Now you may have noticed on the Wind cut where it's got some splintering along this edge, we're on this cross cut of this plywood, and where I had to back it up over there, you see that little end that was not perfectly square, and that's one of the issues you're going to run into with a shorter track. Now it does have 2 tracks, but that means you're going to have 100 inches of track just to make 48-inch cut. It's a little excessive. Now the splinter guard, I think, will probably help the splintering across here. We'll see. On the KREG offcut piece, we did get quite a bit of splintering on there, which is kind of surprising to me. That's the first I've seen that, but I'm going across the grain on the plywood. On the track side though, very, very little. And it actually cut really well. They don't have a whole lot of bogging down. There was a tiny, tiny bit of, I don't want to call it straining. I think it was just, once I got to digging into the wood there, you could feel it kind of give a little bit less power than you had in the initial start. What I do like about the KREG is it has a softer start, and it stops really quickly after you let go of the trigger. Now we'll give the Festool a go. Forgot to drop the splinter guard on this one. Go ahead and do that now. That produced the cleanest cut of all three. As you can see on the left side there is where the Festool cut. There's a tiny bit of tear out, but not much. On the track side, there's no tear out. I mean, it's just a really good cut. There's also plenty of track on each side so you can plunge, make the cut. You get the good 48-inch wide cut easily. And even though this one's battery powered and the other two are corded, this one powered through this 3/4 inch plywood without ever bogging. I also like how quick it is to stop. This is one of those 2-second electric brake it has on it. It's really good. Just a good saw. So I used all three of these to cut through this walnut. It's actually 2 1/4 inches thick, so it's a really beefy piece of walnut. The Wind did pretty good. I was actually kind of surprised at how well it did. It does bog a little bit. I mean, it's a little bit underpowered, as I've said before. The dust collection is not the greatest on the Wind. The KREG handled like a boss. It does lag a little bit. You can feel the motor draining, but it doesn't ever stop or feel like it's not gonna cut it. You can just feel it kind of pull on the motor, but it handled it well. I mean, I wouldn't have any problem cutting that if I needed to, and it was the only saw of the three that cut all the way through the 2 1/4 at full plunge depth. The others just didn't have enough. The Festool, it went through it like butter, like not even, it started bogging a little bit when you see all this dust coming out, and I thought, what is going on with this thing? And I thought I had forgot to turn the hose on, or the vac on, but I didn't. When I pulled it out, it was stopped up. Once I unstopped it, and got that cleared out. It actually cut through it really well. In the middle, once it was full depth at several inches into the cut, it started pulling a little bit, but not as much as a KREG. That's actually surprising because this is on battery power. But it still cut it well, but it did not go all the way through 2 1/4 because it just can't cut that deep on the track. These 3 saws cover a wide budget range from 200, 400 to 800. You basically double every time you go up in a saw here. What do I recommend for most people? If you cut once in, say, every 2 or 3 months, you need 1 cut to break down sheet goods, or maybe a couple of 3 cuts there to break down a piece of plywood to get it in your shop, then the wind will probably serve you just fine because it's a 90-degree cut. You're only going to use it here and there. It's a perfectly acceptable tool for that. Now, if you're going to use it, say, once a week, maybe even twice a week, and you're breaking down sheet goods like that, I say for most people, the KREG's going to be the pick of the litter here, and that's probably surprising seeing how I have this. However, recommending it for you to buy as the weekend woodworker or the DIY woodworker, the KREG is an excellent, excellent tool. It really is. I don't have any problems recommending that. Now, if you're using a saw every day on a job site or in your workshop and you need accuracy and power and you want that warranty that's 3 years wear and tear, then obviously go with the Festool. But you know that you're going to be paying for those extra niceties that you're getting. But most people, I think, will be happy with the KREG. This is the table. I'll get into the features of it in just a minute, but what I really want you to notice is how compact and how storable this thing is. If you're in a small shop, I'm in a garage, 2-car garage, and I also have a home gym right there behind you that's crammed in here, and a CNC crammed in the corner, and a giant workbench in the middle. So space, I've created a space problem. This is perfect for situations like that, or if you just need to store it out of the way while your spouse or significant other needs to park their car in the garage. This is a good way to have a work table that you can actually store out of the way, but it's more than a work table. This thing has so many functions. Let me show you. Not only is it extremely compact when you're not using it, it also has handles and a wheel system so that you can actually roll it around in your shop or on the job site, whatever you're doing with it. These handles actually store out of the way. You can just push these little buttons and they fold down so they're not sticking out. Otherwise, they lock in place. There's also these little pieces here that help hold the legs tight to the table so that they're not flopping around during transport. And when you fold them out, they lock down in place as well. To store it back, you're just going to push in this little tab and that releases this piece that previously locked into place. Once you have the legs extended, you can just roll it to wherever you want and then stand it up. One thing worth mentioning is it, on all 4 feet, it has these adjustable feet that you can screw in or out to adjust the levelness of your table if you're working on an unsteady surface. It also has these little pivoting feet that do help if it is like catching on a small grade or something like that. Of course, you can't have the stand sticking up here out of the way, so it has a little release switch and it folds down out of the way when not in use. This is actually meant to be used with the KREG Track Saw, which is why this track is mounted on there. However, you can take that off easily by removing that knob, and then it folds up out of the way. You can take the other end off the exact same way. And when you put it back in place, because of the way we set it up, the instructions have you set it up, everything's going to lock back in perfectly in the exact same spot where you took it off. Why does that matter? Well, that matters because you want to be able to cut a 90-degree to the table if you're cutting out 90-degree parts. So that's what that is, locks in at the same spot for. All right, so I've removed the track so you can see this is where the track attached to. You saw these hinges. This slot bolts on with this little bolt here, and you can see that it moves a little bit so that you can move it up, slide stock under it, and let it sit back down. These are actually out of the way now, so if I wanted to use this without a track, these aren't going to be in my way and I can just leave those on there. Really simple, really easy and fast to put that track on there. So the table actually comes with a really nice, well-written manual, and KREG has a very detailed video on how to set this thing up out of the box. So I don't want to bore you with all those details since it's already been well covered over there. I'm going to show you the features of the table and why I think it's awesome. The overall construction, it's basically aluminum and MDF, but it's really strong and it's not overly heavy. I really like how the heft of it, it's heavy enough that it doesn't move around on you, but it's not too heavy that it's too cumbersome to move around. It's kind of that sweet spot. The table comes with a whole bunch of extra add-ons straight out of the box, which makes it even that much better. You get these Versa stops, which actually stick down into the dog holes so that you can use them to support the material and keep them at a 90-degree angle when you're cutting them. You also use them to calibrate your track to the table. So if you've moved your table and you want to double check that the track is still square to the table, you just put these Versa stops in, lower your track, and if they are still touching, like when you set it up originally, you make sure they're touching, then you tighten down those brackets on the end that keeps everything nice and square. You may also notice a little groove in the tabletop here. You actually cut that after you get everything set up, and you cut that line, and that gives you a zero clearance under the blade so that your blade can actually cut all the way through the material, and there's zero clearance under there, so there's less splintering on your material if you're cutting plywoods or even cross-cutting boards, things like that. It's just a really good idea. I like it. As far as these Versa stops, you actually get a tall and a short if you need different heights. On the tall ones and the short ones both, you'll notice that the part that goes into the hole is slimmer than the top, so it'll set on top of there, so it's got a positive stop when it sets in there. Because these things are all CNC drilled out, you know that all this stuff is exactly where it's supposed to be. So that means everything's going to be perfect as far as 90 goes if you set your track up right according to the instructions. So you can actually set 2 of those Versa stops in the hole, and then if I wanted to, say, trim that up, I could square this edge up. This would be square to this. Another thing worth pointing out is that you can put a Versa stop here and then put one in a diagonal line with it. If you lay your board up there, that's actually a 45 to where your saw blade will be running on the track. So you automatically have 45-degree miters built in just using the Versa stop, and you wouldn't have to use the miter gauge. If you have regular bench dogs or any type of bench dog accessory, those will fit in those holes as well. It also comes with these positive stops that you can use if you need to make repeatable cuts. So these positive stops run in these T-tracks on top of the table. There are gauges on each side. One of them is for under 10 inches, one is for more than 10 inches. It tells you how to set all that up in the manual. I've got these dialed in just right. If you want both of them to be the same and you're going to be using a longer piece of stock, you can move the measurement, or you can move these blocks to the same measurement on each one, and then this piece actually locks these two in together so that, so you can move them the same and kind of keep everything independent or less independent, although they do rack a little bit. So this piece to me is kind of not needed. What's actually pretty cool about these positive stocks is I can set this one to 8 inches. I can set this one to 6. And what that means is the stop is 6 inches from the edge of your track, or 8 inches, however you have it set. That way you know that that's the length of the cut. It's going to cut right there. So if I was cutting multiple pieces, say I had several pieces to cut at 8 inches, several at 6, and with the positive stops, I would be able to just make multiple cuts the same length without having to reset everything up. If you need to cut pieces longer than 25 inches, which is on here, then it has this extension rod that you can put in the back. That gives you up to 48 inches of measuring. It's not gonna hold this support anything out here because this thing it's just a piece of aluminum that's really flimsy. So if you're cutting something that's really wide and it has a whole lot of weight to the back, you're gonna need to support that in some way. Once you get this extension where you want it, get to the measurement you want, it has this piece on here that just locks it in place so it doesn't slip and move on you and knock your measurement off. So on the measurement, guys, these are just metal aluminum pieces that have markings printed on there somehow. But when you slide them in, you can actually push down right here and micro adjust those to get them dialed in exactly. And the way I did that is I just took my Woodpecker's edge roll, lined it up with the kerf of where the blade cut, and then lined up the marks along the way on each side. Then if you're using this extension that goes up to 48 inches, it tells you right there, 48 extension mark, that's where you're gonna line that up to. So if we were going to 41, and now when the stock hits this is in line, everything's gonna be where you want it. What's great about the way it's built is the track is on hinges, so it actually lifts up. So like 3/4 inch plywood, I could slip under there and then I can just set the track down. Well, now it's setting flat or flush against that plywood. I love the fact that I can cut plywood on this thing, and because of the way the track has a splinter guard on it, the saw has a splinter guard on it, and it's zero clearance on the table, I get zero splintering and zero tear out on plywood. If you're working with something other than plywood, say a 2x6 like we have here. You just need to raise these hinges up to get the stock under the track. Do that on both ends. You can actually use this track and track saw with this table to joint the edge of your board. So if you don't have a jointer, this is a great way to joint those edges. You'll get a perfect 90-degree cut there. You'll also get a nice smooth cut with no splintering. Now if you want to make a good square cross cut, you're just going to use those Versa stops, put those in a couple of those holes, push that freshly jointed or cut edge up against those, and now those are 90 degrees to your track and you can make the cross cut. It also comes with this handy dandy miter gauge. So if you need to cut miters on your stock or you need to cut bevels, not bevels, tapers, then this will be a good option to have on there. This has a scale from 0 to 60 degrees and it's micro adjustable if you need to dial that in. Really easy to use. You're just going to loosen off that little screw there. It also, these two screws run inside that T-track. It can be a little finicky to get inside the track. And once you get it in there, it's there. From there, you can just adjust this from 60 all the way back to 90 or 0. So if you're trying to make 45-degree cuts, you'll move it till the needle shows 45, and then we'll tighten it down, make a cut. You can snug those down so that this doesn't move. It's going to give you good support to your work or your stock. And then we'll make this cut and check the 45 on it. There's a whole lot to like about this table. I like how easy it is to set up. I like how the track and the track saw work with it. And it's just always perfect 90-degree angle. I like the Versa stops. I like that it has these positive stops, and I like that it has these built-in measuring on top of the table. Now, what do I not like? These pieces here are plastic. While they're the good KREG plastic. So if you've got a KREG K5, this is basically the same type of plastic. So it's a good quality plastic, but it's still plastic. This miter gauge could use a little robustness, I think. While it works okay, if I'm cutting miters, I'm probably gonna go to the miter saw. As far as these positive stops, they work perfectly well. I mean, they're plastic too, but for the intended purpose, they work well. If they were metal, it would be better, but these are just fine. This extension thingamajig is a little jinkier. I feel like this is gonna get bent pretty quick. These wrenches that they supply, they don't stay on the bolt heads tight. They slip really easily. And like they're off, they're not exactly right. They're not the right size. So if they fix that, that would be awesome. They work, it's just aggravating. Another thing I don't really care for that I think would be better if this slot all the way around has these, it's almost a T-track. Well, I guess it is a T-track. It's just not standard T-track size, it's smaller. So your standard T-track fittings like these T-track clamps and things like that just won't fit in the track under normal circumstances. You'd need a smaller bolt head size or a smaller T-track size fitting to go in there. Setting up is fast, putting it away is fast. The only thing that I wish was a little different was these tabs that you push in to collapse everything. Sometimes those little plastic pieces that are covering the metal push pin, they're hard to push in or they get moved and you don't actually push them when you thought you were going to. And if you're not careful, you will pinch the far, that's Southern for fire, you will pinch the far out of your finger. It'll hurt. And if you ever forget how to set it up, you get a sticker and you can put on the bottom of your table to tell you how to do it. All in all, it's a pretty good system. If you like this video, all the tips and tricks I've learned over the years just crammed into one video right there. Click in that box, get you the big old virtual fist bump. Go check out that video, you'll love it.